All right, good evening. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order the East Long Meadow School Committee meeting. It is Monday, October 23rd, 2017, and it is 7:05 p.m. Just as a reminder, this meeting is being both audio and video taped. I ask if anyone else is doing so to please let us know. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. If we can all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have roll call starting to my left.
Allison Stevens, student rep.
Bill Fonseca.
Gregory Thompson.
Deirdre Mayu.
Gordon Smith, Superintendent of Schools.
Elizabeth Marcin Boucher.
Valerie Anier, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment.
Pamela Blair, Assistant Superintendent for Business. Kathy Salotti, Recording Secretary.
Excellent. Okay, moving on, 2.1, we have the approval of the October 2nd, 2017 regular meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the October 2nd, 2017 regular meeting minutes.
Okay, motion made
I'll second.
and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And that carries forward 4-0. And just a reminder that Rich Ricciero won't be joining us this evening. Just a reminder of that. All right, so moving down, we have committee and subcommittee communications. So Ally, starting with you. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
So at the high school this week on Wednesday, we have our acoustic cafe put on by the chorus and singing groups. And on October 27th, which is Friday, we have a college fair where all grades can look at and explore colleges and talk to representatives. So that's always informative. Next Wednesday, November 1st, is Winter Sports Night, and next Friday, November 3rd, is the last day of Term 1 for ELHS.
How was
Ready.
homecoming?
It was good.
Yeah, and Spirit Week, everyone
Oh
participated?
yeah, that was fun. Everyone was dressed up, even for days I didn't think would go over very well. Like
Yeah,
Rock
which was the
Star
best
Day.
one?
I think probably Class Color Day or America Day
Oh, yeah.
were big hits.
Cool. Thank you. All right, Bill, do you have anything?
Yep, real quick, next week is the MASC-MASS Joint Conference out in Hyannis. A couple of highlights. Thursday afternoon will be an MSBA update that we will be attending. Friday morning, I get to moderate a panel on the opioid crisis, so I'll bring back plenty of reports on everything that we attend.
All right, I'm just writing something down, sorry. All right, Greg, do you have anything?
Just the one update on the group trying to establish the basketball court, outdoor basketball court. Met again last week. Potential to put it, if funding is secured, close to where it used to be in that area. And we have details to work out in terms of underground wiring and piping and such. Bruce is on board in the discussion, and just an option. So we'll keep you posted on how it's going moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, I just want to talk about a couple of things. I did make it over on Friday to Birchland Park, where they had a pink day that was in reference to the Rays of Hope. Their school council raised $1,000 for Rays of Hope just through various fundraisers, mostly through shirts and little items. And then about 20 or so students did participate in the march, or the walk on Sunday. And I even think Tim Allen participated in that with the students also. So it was really fun walking into the classroom, or into the lunchroom, and seeing all the kids in pink. So they did have a sort of pink out. And then the second thing I wanted to let everyone know was last week, after we've had our Monday public hearing, I had called Don Anderson because I know they were starting another town subcommittee meeting around communications and media, how to best utilize social media to the town's advantage to get information out to residents. And it was very, very interesting. There were about 5 or 6 of us there. I think Ryan Quimby was in on it, Don Kavanaugh, Don Anderson, myself, another graduate of the school, Dylan Pilon, I think. He owns a marketing company in town. And just to really try to think of ways that we can utilize Facebook, any other social media accounts to really get the community more involved and more aware of what's going on. So for instance, we spoke about this new service that the town offered called Service 911, I think it's called, where you can register, as a resident town, you register with this Service 911, and the police department's able to make reports or have information about the town residents, if there was some sort of disaster, they can know that, oh, here's a house where a child had special needs. Oh, look, these bedrooms are on the top floor. Or, you know, I think because from the last blackout that we had, they noticed that there were a lot of homebound seniors
Right.
that didn't have other neighbors or people visiting. So they just want to be able to know like what's going on in town. I just felt like something like this, we should be informing our families in the school, because that affects them just as much as it does any other town resident. So it was really interesting to be a part of this communication subcommittee, and we're gonna work on it and see where we can take it to really get, and I didn't know if it was like, can we work parallel with them or in conjunction with them? So I kind of went there not just as a resident, but also on the school committee to see like, what can we be doing also
Sure.
to be getting messages out. So that was my little other tidbit that I had this week. So enough about me now. All right, Beth, anything?
All right, well, I'm going to start off with Willie Ross had their 50th anniversary gala. For those of you who don't know, Willie Ross was actually a school that was set up by the parents who had children who were hard of hearing or deaf. And back in the day, they would take these children and they would put them in a school where they would live away. And their big thing was they wanted their kids here. So it's a very successful school, and our partnership has helped them along with that. And one of our students, Brian Ramos Navarro, he got up and he spoke so eloquently, I could have cried, about just what he had to go through, how his parents left their home to move up here and fought then to get him into this school just so he could have the same life as all the other kids and students around him. And they had other speakers too, but he just really, you know,
Right.
he really
He's
did
a
it.
senior here.
He's a senior,
Okay.
yeah. He plays on the, because his home school would be considered central, so he
Right.
plays on the
Central baseball.
central baseball, I think on varsity, and just very well-spoken young man. And it
Talking
was,
about social media, Beth took the picture, I tweeted it out.
it's true.
And then
There you go.
I picked up.
I'm like, we
just
should like
him-
tweet this,
him
so.
delivering
Yeah.
a very poignant speech.
Yep.
And so we tweeted it out, and it's been one of the more popular retweets.
Oh, well, that's good. See, I'll have to look, I haven't gone.
That's
nice.
The other thing I want to say is eLeaf, who has desperately been trying for years now to get to $1 million, is at 854,702. And last year's gala, the last year's event made, it was over $50,000, which was one of their biggest events of that kind. And there wasn't even an auction, which, you know,
Right.
was pretty impressive. So we're hoping to see that. We're hoping to get people out there more to understand what eLeaf is, because we're finding that it's just, I know that they want to work on getting the word out, so I think they're going to come up with some suggestions on whether it's not maybe the teachers, if they get a grant, could kind of give a review of how it's helped and just to let the community know. They will be funding $23,000 in grants this year, so you'll hear a little bit more about that.
What is that date?
That's going to be February 10th, if that's, yeah, I think it's February 10th, but I'll have the exact.
10th with a question mark.
Yes, and it will be at Twin Hills. Also, this Wednesday at Christopher's, which is kind of by Allen and Cooley, they are having an event. I think it's like from 6, 7 o'clock until 9 or 10. The Aralotta family evidently owns Christopher's, and they've offered to let them come in. They're going to do a buffet. If you wear a costume, it's $5. If you don't, it's $10. It's for adults, and they'll obviously have the bar tender there and that type of thing, and the proceeds from the tips and that type of stuff and any additional monies that are paid into for the buffet will go directly to eLeaf. So it's Wednesday, it is an adult thing, and in the future they hope to do it maybe for students. So I had a lot today.
Yeah, well done. Great. All right. Moving down onto presentations, we have 5.1.1, the survey results from Quick Phone Survey on first 6 weeks of school.
Okay, so in your packets, you have a Blackboard Connect survey results. This is similar to the one we had done earlier in the year. It's a very quick hitting item, and it captures you in the moment. So of the 2,200 calls that went out, 256 people responded. You can either agree to respond or you can hang up. So we had a decent amount of people that decided to hang up. But of the 256 that responded, we were looking for 3 quick questions. One, just how they saw the opening week of school and the transition back from summer. And we got 96% strongly agreeing or agreeing with the transition back and that had gone well. Then the second question was dealing with how parents and guardians saw our staff sort of answering questions and being service-oriented, and we had 94% strongly agreeing and agreeing. And then the last question was just around our open house evenings. Were they well-organized in providing information and insight into their child's classroom and educational programming for this year? And that one, we got 89% strongly agreeing and agreeing. It just gives you another quick snapshot of how people are seeing, in this case, the first 6 weeks of school.
And I just, oh,
Just
No,
a
go
question,
on.
did you
Yeah.
take the no response out of that percentage? I'm just wondering, because
Yes. Yeah.
the number got larger as it went along. I noticed.
Yeah, it did, you're right. So I basically was just taking the numbers that strongly
Top
agree
four.
in the parentheses against the actual parentheses of who responded.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
and again, I just wanted to apologize, I skipped a section on our agenda because I was scribbling.
Yep.
So, I just want to know that I missed the part for the opportunity for visitors to address the committee. So normally this would be the time where someone could come up, so is anyone here willing to come up or needing to come up? My apologies.
Jonathan Torsha, 79 Tompkins.
Hold on one second.
So first, I just wanted to thank everyone for participating in last week's public hearing on the citizens petition brought forth to this committee. This was, as some may not have known, the first petition brought forth under the new language in the town charter. So a big milestone indeed. And regardless of where people stood on the issue, it was a fantastic opportunity for not just the general public, but the high school students in particular, to engage in something like this. While there were many different viewpoints coming from the students on this petition, there was also a common theme I noticed in their testimony, and that was the stress in our current schedule. As students referenced in their testimony, there had been 2 major schedule changes over about a 2-year time period. While schedule changes are relatively common and happen through the years, to have 2 of them between just 2 years, or about 2 or 3, give or take, depending on the testimony, it seems to have, it may have caused some stress amongst the greater ELHS student body. This is referencing from what a number of the students said. And while I'm not here to criticize anybody or any policy, I would definitely encourage this committee, the administration of the high school, or anybody who's in charge of this process to maybe take a look at steps in the future to reducing this type of stress. And while, and this comes from not just hearing the testimony, but from a personal standpoint. So I wasn't here, obviously, when the second change took effect, but I was here when they did the first round of scheduled changes. And it was definitely a sizable impact, not just for the students, but definitely for the adjusting for the teachers and everything. And that's definitely a very normal process to go through. But definitely looking at that in the future, or in the next couple of years when we have new, different changes. But again, thank you very much for the opportunity.
But I just have a question for you, John. What was the second schedule change? Because I'm not aware of 2 schedule changes.
Well, I
know we
heard-
did have our
yeah,
hybrid one, but the new one that we had this year,
Yeah,
just the addition of
I
a
mean,
Spartan block.
I heard that from the students. So and again, I'm not
Yeah.
privy
I think
to
I
it.
can
So I
provide
think-
an answer.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was just that one change.
Or I know
think-
Birchland changed their schedule too at one point.
Correct, but I think the high school students were probably remarking on the transition process that took about 2 years to get into our current schedule.
Yeah.
And so from and certainly jump in, Ally and John, because you lived it as students. I think when you go probably in many of the students who spoke the other night, their freshman year from a block schedule, and then you transition to a new schedule.
And then it modified, I guess,
And then
the next
this year,
It didn't
we
completely-
knew
yeah,
that we
no,
were
I know it
going
didn't
to make
completely change,
tweaks. Although John didn't live the tweaks that
Yeah,
went
I
into
didn't,
place
and
this
again, I
year.
didn't experience
Yeah.
It
this,
would
I
be-
just, yeah.
So, It's not really that they had
No.
three different schedules, it's that the transition going from the block that they experienced 3 years ago to what they're experiencing today, and hopefully they're feeling better about
No,
today's
and
schedule.
I hope so. I think, I just wanted to bring to a point that was common, not just like in a handful of people.
Right.
Like, I think I don't know, you guys probably caught it too, in almost every student. They referenced, I heard the schedule, but
Schedule changes.
not all of them referenced schedule. I think they also referenced just other things too, but both those
Right.
issues, so I just.
Yeah.
No, it's
No, it's a good point. Every year, we always look at the schedule and think about how can we make it better for our students, and that's all you can do. You're never gonna come up with one ideal schedule, so it's
Right.
constantly in flux and change.
And hopefully at this point, with the tweaks we made going from last year to this year, we're seeing fewer needed changes. I would defer to Ally.
Yeah,
She's
probably.
living it right now.
She's probably the only one that can tell us the
Yeah,
best.
last year was a little rough, but I definitely think that this year's schedule is better. It's more like it's like stability, like you know what classes you'll have on what day. Like it's every week is the same basically. Like Monday's the same, Tuesday's the same, Wednesdays. The only one that really changes is Friday, which is like fine because you get to see all your classes before the weekend. So I definitely think that this year's schedule fixed any major issues from
Yeah.
last year. Like I feel a lot more comfortable with it, and I know a lot of people do too. So.
And
And I
I
know
think
that
for
the-
our, you know, because my daughter's the same age as I think for that grade was probably the toughest change for
Yeah,
them,
'cause you're
because
so
you already
used to the
had
other
the 2
one for
years
2
of the other
years.
schedule.
And I think a lot of the students during the public hearing were from your daughter and Ally's grade.
Yeah.
Too.
Right.
A number of them,
Yeah.
quite a number of
So
them.
the revisions that were made this year by the high school staff was based on feedback from the student body
Right.
as well
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
staffing.
Yeah.
So whenever you implement something new, that you can't get it 100% correct the first time. So they were listening to the students and the staff, and they made the revisions.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. Oh, second person coming up. Mr. Harrigan, how are you?
Well, I'm back.
Mr. Harrigan, how are you?
Well, again, thank you for hosting the hearing last week. I do have a question, though, on the ground rules. Denise Menard and I worked together for over a dozen years in East Windsor, and she wanted to just testify in terms of my credibility, but she wasn't allowed to speak.
Okay. So if you would like an answer for that, I'll be the one that made that
Okay.
decision, and to be totally honest with you, we just didn't feel comfortable, and I wanted to stick with lead petitioner. This is the first time we've had something come to us.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to also say about that, we weren't there to talk about your character. You know, really the petition was about adding civics as a course and it being a graduation requirement, regardless of who the person is presenting that petition or writing that petition. So I didn't feel that we needed Denise Menard there to speak about your character.
My
And-
background.
Yeah, and
not my
that's
character,
fine.
not my
You
ethics.
could speak
Background
to
and
your
experience.
background.
What that I've done in the past. And you know, my intent was, and I use Rich Vitero as an example, when he retired, he gave an awful lot back to the town, and still continues to. Okay. And in talking to him, I said, well, what do I have? What is my expertise? And it's student government, or excuse me, American government. The word civics, I'm sorry I used it, because what happened, that ended up being community activity, which is great.
Right.
But raising money for hurricane victims is not American government. You see, it's humanitarianism. So the concern is American government.
Okay.
I was disappointed so many students stressed the idea of we're going to lose our electives. Our electives, our electives. Well, I know that at Ludlow High School, American government is required, and they still have plenty of electives. And Gordon Smith maybe could attest to that.
And they do offer electives. The ability for students to select them before senior year is limited.
Okay.
And so I think one of the challenges that both the high school and East Long Meadow High School and Ludlow High School consistently look at is how do you open that up? How do you allow students to not have to wait to their fourth year of high school to be able to take some of the electives they're interested in? The challenge with Ludlow's schedule is that they are in a traditional 7-period day, or at least they were when I was there. And so there's not a lot of flexibility around semester courses and that kind of thing. And so you are correct. They have electives that were in the program of studies.
Yep.
Unfortunately, not all of them would run.
And they'd be taking junior year as well?
Could they be taken junior year? Yes, but the amount of requirements that they had both in social studies and then other core academic areas, their schedules were such that they could not necessarily put that in junior year. So there were very few electives that were taken until senior year.
Well, as you well know, that I tried to introduce Model Congress here, reintroduce.
Sure.
And after many, many emails and a personal appearance, I was getting nowhere. So Rich Ficero came to you and asked for a meeting. And we started that program.
Right, no,
But it
that's
was
a wonderful program. Thank you for
Very
doing that.
frustrating to get it going, I guess, you know? And the same with voter registration. I come in and I'm willing to do it, but no help from the social studies department, no help from the administration. These are the things I think you should be concerned about. It could be so much better with a little bit, and you know, we've had these conversations, you know? And again, you know, I'm away from this, I retired, but it is a kind of an opportunity to bring something positive to the school.
Right.
And so far, I've met with negative, negative, negative.
I
Well,
think actually, if I may, one of the positives
I know we're
was,
gonna be
was
discussing
Monday
this
night. I
later.
know we're gonna be discussing this later on in the agenda, but certainly one of the things, and you helped us get there, was what happened Monday night, which John actually just mentioned. That was an incredible,
Oh, yeah.
incredibly positive discussion. And I think because of that, you're gonna open up new discussions, some of which
Right.
started to take place right after the public hearing formally closed.
Right.
I think you and Mr. Polk were talking.
you.
I came over and we were talking. I think the way the high school staff presented at the end, they really were listening to a lot of what some of the students had brought, not so much to the schedule changes, but what they brought around areas where we can do certain things that we had not necessarily thought of immediately, which is maybe using your new Spartan block to do certain things. And so I think we're in a whole different realm, if you will. I mean, that's a poor choice of words, but it's the one that's coming up at the moment. Because I think you have a lot of people who participated on Monday and want to continue those discussions. And so I thank you for bringing us to that point where we had a chance to share with the entire community what we do, but more importantly, start to get at what more can we do, and how would you define this differently, you know, whatever this may be. Because there are a number of points that students brought up where we can start to get at voter registration, you know, how do we do more things with Model Congress?
Yeah.
I think Mr. Polk mentioned that he was working with Mr. Phelan regarding some potential grants.
From the Cultural Council.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So,
Yeah.
so I think you
Yeah.
brought us to a point where, and so thank you for that, where we had a pretty incredible discussion for 2.5 hours that I think, or I know, will continue.
And we can thank really the new charter. You know, that's the
Sure.
reason for the charter, certainly.
Right.
But certainly I said to Ed Polk that I'd be happy to work with him
Sure.
on some of these areas, okay? I think it is important. Someone asked me, are you sorry you got into this? Because it's been a few years. And my response was, I feel sorry for the students that missed Model Congress over the years. I feel sorry for the students that weren't encouraged to register to vote over the years. I feel sorry for the students that don't study local government. It's not included, and I asked the government teacher last year, no, I don't include local government. At a time for the charter. I arranged to have Tom Florence and Kevin Manley, Eric Lesser come in to talk. It didn't go over well because the students had no background. So that's another area,
Right.
Right.
certainly. I
Sure.
think it's important
Absolutely.
that they know what's going on here. You know? Who's gonna sit in these seats in the years to come?
Right.
Unless they get involved, you know? But, and certainly I go back to that American government. I'm sorry I used the word civics. I am. But so many adults said, civics, I had that when I was in school. It's American government, half year. And it's important that students have the opportunity to study news literacy, in the words of Eric Lesser. Critical thinking, their rights and responsibilities. Follow a campaign. What are the policies? What is the strategy of the candidates? They don't do that in other classes. You can't. You're either teaching history or you're teaching government. It's difficult to blend the two. So again, that's after 40 years of supervising social studies teachers, and know that the curriculum has to be sound and they have to be involved. And I don't think the scattered approach can work, but that's just my opinion from my standpoint, and certainly I think we can do better. I think it's very important, not only for the students, but for the community, that they have a background and know American government is important, because you have decided, yes, there is a focus on it. The focus would be a separate course. That's my presentation.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
My,
Thank you.
and my only other answer I want to say
Yeah.
that too is I really want to see what the state changes also for us
Sure.
too. Because I know Eric Lessa does have a couple of things in
Sure.
legislation and, you know, trying to go through, and we don't, and they're encouraging DESI to make some changes and
Right.
incorporate things, so we'd want to see what that looks like too.
Sure.
If we want to consider the schedule and not make so many changes all the time.
American government will always be there in the social studies curriculum. My son is the principal at Natick High School. The department themselves approached him and said, we believe we should have a course in American government for everyone, especially in this day and age. Students don't know the basics of American government. But
I just want to say,
Oh, yeah.
the irony of this all is that this is an exercise in local government, and that
Yeah.
this is bring, myself personally, what I get out of this whole exercise is more knowledge on what we're doing in the classroom level.
Yeah.
And so I think by bringing this forward and having the session on Monday, it's a
can only be
full
better.
exercise of government. So
Yeah.
it's working well, I would say, and hopefully we as a committee and as a district can continue with this momentum and figure out what we can do so that
The next step.
the youngsters amongst us have that knowledge base going forward, so. I
and
think
if the
it's
government
great.
teacher asks you to come in to the class to explain what you do, would you be there?
I'd be there,
Sure,
yeah.
Yeah.
sure you would.
Yeah,
Any one of us.
Yeah, so it's, you know.
Good stuff.
It is.
It is all good stuff.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
but thank you very
Great,
much.
thank you, have a good night.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All this good stuff. And again, I apologize for having skipped a step there, I didn't mean to, I'm just used to it. All right, so moving down to Assistant Superintendent for Business Report, we have 5.2.1, the East Long Meadow High School bench donation.
So in your packet, you will see a letter from Dr. Flanagan, the East Long Meadow High School, and there is a $200 donation from Brian Cahill to be used to purchase a bench in memory of Mrs. Ann P. Lynch. She was a former English teacher here at East Long Meadow High School. The bench will be placed in the main office or the courtyard. I'm sorry, the main office corridor. I should put the glasses back on. Main office corridor or the courtyard.
I move to accept the $200 donation from Brian Cahill in honor of Mrs. Lynch for the bench donation.
Okay, motion's made.
Second.
Second, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And that carries forward 4-0.
Great, thank you.
Okay, moving down to 5.2.2, we have another bench donation.
That's correct. So in your package, you'll see another letter from Dr. Flanagan at the high school. There's a total of $625 here. Again, this is for donations to be used to purchase a bench to commemorate the class of 1985, and the bench will be placed in the main office corridor or the courtyard. There's a $25 check from Michael Schaefer, $50 check from Michelle Fontana, $150 from James Lindahl, $100 from Alan Gagne, $100 from Kevin White, $100 from Connor Morneau and Olin LLP, $100 from Daniel Buendo, for a total of the $625.
Okay.
Move to accept the ELHS bench donation in the amount of $625 to commemorate the class of 1985.
All right, motion's made
I'll second.
and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. That carries forward 4-0.
Great, thank you.
Okay, moving down, thank you, to 5.2.3, the Mountain View gift donation.
And lastly, you'll see a letter from Elaine Santinello, the principal at Mountain View Elementary School, requesting the school committee to approve a $500 check from Grin and Barrett for a 3-year sign-on. bonus with them, so this will go into the gift account for the school.
So, why do we do this? A
Um,
3-year
Three-year
contract
contracts?
for the $500 donation?
Most of the photography companies have some type of bonus, whether it be a signing bonus or the amount of packets that you sell, they all offer something.
Right.
They do. Do we put it out for a
It does not need,
comparative
it's
comparative
exempt
bid
from,
though?
it is exempt from 30B.
Right, so I guess my question would be,
So
because
each-
we're allowing one company to come in and giving them a 3-year exclusivity, do we know that we're getting the best bang for our buck out of that process in terms of what we're asking parents to pay for photography for their kids? I don't mean to put on more work for
Yeah.
principals, but if we're taking in money because we're giving a 3-year contract, then I think we should be a little responsible with
Pricing.
pricing it. I think it's pretty expensive to get the 8 pictures that I get for my daughters, in terms of what it is. I know there's cost to it, I get it, I understand
It
that.
is.
But if we're receiving money as payment for a contract, I don't know. I don't wanna put more work on it, I'm just asking, are we comfortable with the fact that we're not?
I leave it in the hands of the principal, they're the ones who deal with the
Yeah.
vendors, and they have that choice, because it is exempt from 30B, and they're the ones who know the quality of the pictures and deal with the vendors. They all have a fee that, that comes back to, or a donation that comes back to the school. Anyways, all of the vendors do this, so.
Is it all the same fee, I guess it would be a question, or?
They all package it in unique ways.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a very good.
I would say
way to put it.
Grin and Barrett is one of the better
Better.
known and higher quality groups that's out there doing student
Okay.
pictures. They seem to be in many districts, at least districts
That's
I've been
true.
in.
And same here.
Are they, all of our schools use
That
use
was my
them?
question.
And are they in the same cycle of, like, contracts?
I don't
don't
know that
know.
all our schools
Right.
use Grin and Barrett.
don't know the
would
answer to that.
hazard a guess that most do, but I don't know that for a fact.
I don't recall ever seeing a donation like this come in
I think it's
to any of
somewhat
our
new.
meetings.
yeah.
I don't- This is
I've
the
never
first time
seen a 3-year like this either, but
Yeah.
every year though, I bring forward checks back from Grin and Barrett that go into the gift account as a donation.
So to that
to
point
the
though,
school.
because it's a 3-year, right, so in theory, they could double their prices next year and triple them the following year, and we'd have to go with them?
I think if they sign
I'm
on
not saying
for
they're gonna
3
do that,
years-
I'm being
Right.
cynical, obviously,
I
but I'm
think-
just
I would
saying.
think
They
that there's-
basically have provided the principal with a contract of what the pricing will look like.
Right.
3
that's-
years?
That's what I'm,
Okay,
yes.
I'm comfortable with it, and if that's
And
what
I
they're
will
doing.
follow up on that to double
If
check.
that's what they're doing, then I'm comfortable with it.
But, yes.
Okay, so with that, I'll move that we accept the Mountain View gift donation from Grin and Barrett for a 3-year sign-on bonus for 2018 through 2020.
Okay, motion made
A second.
and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And that carries forward 4-0. Thank you.
Great.
All right, now we are moving down to Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction report. We have 5.3.1, review new accountability reporting from the state.
So as Mr. Neer starts that, I'm just gonna pop the screens on here.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to turn this one on?
Please. You do have in your packets the slides printed out, but for others, so that they can also participate in the presentation.
Well, originally, I missed the PowerPoint.
Mrs.
I told him I was
Neer
gonna
will
add
walk
2
us through
slides just
this,
as he was
but
gonna be here.
I'm sure most of you know that as we have been transitioning with our state assessment, we've last year settled into what they're calling the next generation MCAS. And that also prompted a lot of your standards revision, most notably ELA and math. Social studies is in that process now, and we're making sure that all our work is geared towards knowing what the new standards are and then aligning our curriculum accordingly.
So I've adapted a presentation that the state has put out. I kind of tailored it and shrunk it down just so we can get the highlights to kind of provide context for when we're looking at data at our next meeting. Oh, where's my, how do I? Okay, it's not clicking right. I was having some technical difficulties with my drive, so we're gonna hope it goes through. So there's just a few quick slides on this. So the next generation MCAS, we know that the original MCAS, or what they're calling legacy MCAS, has been in place for 20 years, and that over the last 4 or 5 years, they've been revising and developing a new assessment. The new assessment focuses more on critical thinking abilities, application of knowledge and skills, as opposed to just general recall, and also makes a lot of connections between reading and writing. The idea for revising to the new standard from the state was to have an assessment that was more aligned with showcasing students' college and career readiness, as opposed to you've completed the expectation at high school. And if you talk to them, they'll make a difference with that. Like, our students need to be ready to be successful beyond 12th grade. So that's what the assessment does. It's designed to be computer-based, and they are phasing that in so that the majority of students will take it on the computer. It was first given this past spring in grades 3 through 8 in math and in ELA. It will eventually replace all MCAS, including the 10th grade MCAS, starting spring of 2019. So this year's 10th graders in 2018 will take the last legacy MCAS. Next year, the next generation MCAS will be from 3 through 8 in all content areas, ELA, math, and science.
So this year's
3 through
9th
10.
graders will be the first group at 10th grade to
Correct.
take the next generation MCAS as a competency determination.
Correct. So this past year, across the state, about 60% of all 3 through 8 students took the assessment on the computer. It was required to be taken in 4th and 8th grade on the computer. In ELPS, we had all of our students take the assessments on Chromebooks in grades 4 and 8. They're phasing in the testing so that all tests are done in 2019 on the computer. This spring in East Long Meadow, we will have grades 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 take the assessment in ELA and math, and in grades 5 and 8 in science and technology on computers or Chromebooks. They'll be taking it online. So because there's this transition between the 2 types of assessments, there are 2 different score reports being released. So you have the next generation MCAS reports on ELA and math in grades 3 through 8, and then legacy MCAS for your science and technology assessments in 5th and 8th, as well as your 10th grade assessments in ELA math, and also the science and technology. So here's what that's going to look like for us now. We have 2 different sets of reports. For 10th grade and for our grades 5 and 8 in science, you still have the achievement levels that we have grown accustomed to over the years of advanced, proficient, needs improvement, warning. In ELA and math, these are the new achievement levels. So there's exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, partially meeting, and not meeting. And you can see the descriptors there.
One of the things that we're probably going to be explaining for most of this year is that the meeting expectations and partially meeting expectations, you see how it's lining up, where each is taking a little part of proficient. That's because students that with the old standards in the legacy MCAS who scored proficient, now with the new standards and the new assessment may be in that partially meeting expectations at the higher end of that. And so that's going to be a new way of looking at things for our parents, for our teachers, for our students.
And the scales have changed as well with their,
Yeah.
the scale
It's more,
scores.
it looks like it's just a name change.
Well,
Is that,
How the assessment plays out, well, the achievement levels, yes, I have to say, I appreciate the change in the names because these are a little more positive in nature
Right.
than saying, warning. And it should say warning failing, because that's what it is, warning failing. So you're not meeting the expectations now, but it doesn't mean you can't be meeting them. So I will say that I appreciate that nomenclature better than what we've had in the past.
I just feel like how much time and effort was put
However-
in changing the names, I'm sorry.
Well, and
Well, it's an all new MCAS,
I don't
that's
think a
fine.
whole lot. has
they
been-
also
I think-
changed your point scale.
The scale and the actual content of the assessment is where the huge change is. And we've
Okay.
known that for years in 3 through 8 because we've experienced it and we've been trying to ratchet up to meet that. It is in alignment more with our revised ELA math standards. It does ask students to really portray more of their critical thinking and use of knowledge and not just spit back random facts and figures. So That was and has been a driver for a while, just knowing the difference in the way that, it really helped you see the change in the standards, I'll say. But staff came and said, now I understand what some of these standards are really saying because we can see the student expectation side. With that, you get results that look a little different.
Can I just go back before you go any
Yes.
further? I'm sorry. Just because of the new definitions on this, and specifically, I'll go to you put it in red, or it was in red, the additional academic assistance, and that wasn't in the legacy MCAS in the explanation. So does it automatically trigger if a student in a certain subject matter partially meets expectations? Are we automatically triggering additional academic assistance?
So
Not
we
necessarily.
always look at the students who are performing below where, in legacy proficient or partially meeting expectations. And the first thing we would do is take a look at our internal assessment information and then our knowledge of that student's performance over time. So a lot more internal information would come in. And then it could be used as one of the 3 prongs. We use at least 3 different pieces of information in our tiered instructional system to identify students who need further assistance or intervention. So yes, we do look at this for that reason. We've always looked at it for that reason. And while they're highlighting the red here,
Yep.
if you received a parent report in the past with needs improvement or warning and failing, there was always some type of statement, just
Like
not as
that.
bold, that said to provide to contact the school and the students, your child's educators, to find more, information out about how your child's doing and how to support them.
Will we say the same thing? Something similar to that?
Correct.
Is that generated, who generates that
So
statement?
we
We're actually drafting a
yeah,
letter.
we have a
It's
letter.
our statement, it's not the state statement, it's the local district that generates that statement?
Well, this statement here is the
This
state.
State.
statement
In
is
the red.
the state
Does this
statement right here. So
statement
this
go on the
would be
report?
on a parent report.
This does go on the report.
We will have a letter, Gordon and I drafted a letter that'll go in front of the reports that go home, along with, there is a state letter that'll be there too that gives a lot more information, but we provided just the East Long Meadow context in the cover letter.
Okay.
And then the parent reports, which I don't have a sample for you here, but I can show you if you're interested at another time, are more detailed, but actually more easily understandable. As someone who receives those reports at home, I kind of like the way the new reports look. Because they give you the overall and then they break down, and they always did that with that long grid, right, on the old
Right.
ones, but it seems they break it down by content strands. So you
Okay.
can see in math where particularly they got a 6 out of 10, your child got a 6 out of 10, the majority of people, or fourth graders in this strand received 5 out of 10. So you can see the comparison and really detail out. Yeah, a little more of the information. And it actually is helpful, I think, for our teaching staff, because when we look at our other instructional information, particularly K-5, K-8, we're able to see, does that match what we saw on STAR? Does it match what we've seen in our common assessments or our DBAs? Does it match what we've seen in our BAS, or even just our regular assessments in math? So are we seeing, teacher input is always one of those. It doesn't have to be a formal assessment. It could be just feedback from the teacher based on their formative assessments.
So I guess also what I'm wondering then, to follow up on that though, is if a parent receives this report and with the partially meeting or the not meeting, and it has this statement, are they going to then expect some sort of contact to be made from the school?
So I would say that if it's a pattern of need, if that type of performance, if a child shows that they have had the same difficulties in our internal assessments and daily instructional, then they would absolutely have some contact from the school, because we do provide tiered instruction now.
Right.
We start with, quite frankly, we even use, before these assessments come out, we're looking at the child's previous assessments along with what they came up with for STAR. So some of these students may already be in an intervention based on their performance from the previous year, their most recent information that we have. So I'm pretty confident to say that the majority of them would already be in a specialized program or in an intervention, and if they weren't, then there was a reason for that, and the school could.
But will this if they weren't, will this trigger at least a look at it? Because what it's saying is,
Yes, yeah.
should consider whether
Yeah.
the student needs additional, and it
Yes.
says the school should
Oh,
consider, so it's
absolutely.
up to the school.
And I
It's-
feel like
but-
the parents are gonna be
Responsibility on us.
And I can tell you that's
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
happened. Like,
Okay.
the schools are already looking at this, they're pulling reports, They've kind of looked at it with the students' other data that they have, and
I
if they're
think
not
that's-
in their tiered programs now, they're probably slated to be in them, but our tiered programs are up and running right now.
Right.
We're already
But I think the
servicing the
key
students.
is what you said in terms of, this is one data point.
Right.
So if a parent were to call, we would talk or speak to the fact that this is one data point, and we would also then speak to, and the teachers have now, we've done a really good job over the last few years of providing teachers, as they inherit new students, a number of data points. And so this would be one of the data points that they can speak to the parents about, and then see, okay, based on this and a few other data points, I would recommend, which Mrs. Neer is talking about right now, an intervention. Or at this time, this is one data point, and I'd like to see how we do on the district
And-
benchmark assessments.
But so that's my point though, if this is the first trigger, right, this is the first time the flag goes up,
Right.
does it trigger us considering additional academic support, because that's what it says it's doing?
Well, I want to say that the scores here are going to be baseline, and the next slide I'm going to show you is going to show you that we're going to have, across the state, there's about 50% of students who are meeting and exceeding. So the standard setting for this assessment is different. So are we going to ignore that they come back partially meeting or not? No, but there are going to be more students potentially in those areas, and so it's more important for us to be looking at triangulating the information before we put in place something that may not be necessary. So this is one assessment, whether it's the MCAS or STAR, that's just one incident.
And I get
I
that.
need to see a pattern, right?
Right,
So,
but if you're telling me, if the report comes home, my student gets a partially meeting, and it says this, the school should consider whether the student needs additional academic assistance to succeed in the subject.
I am confident that the schools have looked at that
Okay.
and then looked at their other educational information
That's
about
what I
that
want.
student. And if there is that pattern of need, then they are making plans
Okay.
or they're already meeting that need
Perfect.
through tiered
Okay,
instruction.
great, thank you.
Yep. So and here's what I was alluding to. So the green and the orange are your exceeding and meeting respectfully, and you'll notice that it's around 48 to 50% across the state for grades 3 through 8. And that's because the standard setting was very different than our previous assessment. It kind of matches that rigor level. We do anticipate that, at our next meeting, you'll see how we fared with this. An important word to remember is baseline. Everything's new. It's a whole new show now. So everything that our students are performing at, the results that we get back, it's really our baseline to kind of set goals off of, and really should not and cannot be compared to previous, in grades 3 through 8, previous performance,
And
because it's a different.
Are we gonna explain that to parents as well?
Yes, that
That's
is in
actually-
the letter.
That's in the letter.
That
That's
is,
in the
I
letter.
believe it's
Yeah.
bolded. This is baseline.
Well, it should be bolded, because.
And then we
it-
do provide them with, in that letter, just a quick snapshot, like what does this mean for East Long Meadow? And we can't compare to where we were before, but we can
Right.
compare ourselves to where the state is. So we show how we perform against the state and that we continue to do,
You-
we're
These,
continuing to do
this
well.
We don't have that data yet, or we do?
We're
In the
slowly
process- in the
coming.
process
We
of
do,
being
but we
expanded.
don't.
Correct.
No.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. Last week, toward the end of the week, they lifted the embargo and started to release all this data to the schools.
got it.
Yeah.
So we haven't received we've received copies of what the parent reports will look like, but we haven't received the parent reports in district yet.
Okay.
But what this will do is will drive our presentation at the next meeting around SMART goals and how we present this, so that it's more tailored to the new look than it is to the old look.
So we won't necessarily be able to use
This year is
as-
correct.
Baseline.
It's just a
It's
baseline.
your baseline.
Yeah.
And you're gonna see that in our presentation
Right.
on the 6th, November 6th.
Yeah.
Because we're giving more aggregate information in ELA, math, and science, and showing you where we are on a whole. And we might have some other comparisons in there, but we're not gonna compare to previous years because the standard
This is
setting
year
is
one.
different.
Different.
How they're the scales are, not just the wording, but the scales are different. So we really have to we're starting new.
Well, and based on these state results, are they gonna change the scaling of this,
They
I
are
don't-
changing the scores.
The
In
score-
terms of your passing score, it used to be 220, which got you into the needs improvement.
Yeah.
Now I think we're going all the way up to 580, if I'm correct.
The scale goes up into the 500s,
Right.
so I don't,
And so your
I
threshold-
don't
Right, so
off the top
would
of my
that
head
change
know what it was.
how this looked?
That's one of the reasons, but I'll show you, so the next couple slides might help
Okay.
us understand that a little bit more. It's a lot to take in.
Before you move on, one of the things that the state presents is this distribution and this look is very similar to the National Assessment for Educational Progress, the NAEP, which reports in a fashion. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I'm stealing the thunder of the slide down the road.
It's a good
So I apologize.
preview, it's a good preview.
That's coming later.
Cool.
And I just
I
wanted to
barely
make sure
wait.
you were attentive to it.
It's a new
But-
acronym.
but
for
they
us.
can
Sometimes we need to hear it
still-
a few times though, right?
They'll
That's
still
good.
give us numbers that compare us to other, like, towns that are comparable
The
to
DART
us?
is not
They
updated
eventually,
right now.
yeah,
Oh,
they
okay.
eventually will update the DART, but right now it's not.
Right, so I mean, we could compare to what our DART districts were last year, not knowing whether those are all gonna stay the same. Usually two of them change
Yeah.
annually. It depends on how people's demographics and other data points
Right.
that they measure us against have changed. Usually it's one or two districts that changes.
So this is really
Sorry.
baseline then?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is
Can't get any
like
lower.
Yeah.
really baseless. So the results, it shows you here, that it does not mean that our students haven't learned less. I would actually say our students are learning more now that that we've had a few years in the new standards, and engaging them in different ways to kind of enhance critical thinking and engagement. It's just a different measurement. It measures differently. So that's why we don't want to make a comparison. It measures differently. 2017, again, is the baseline year. I can't say that enough. If we were due for a change, like sometimes I want to say, oh my gosh, why'd they do this? But 1998,
What's not working?
that
For a long
assessment was
time.
not designed for the type of thinking that our students do on a regular basis, or the type of thinking we need them to do. So I can see why they, whether I'm not saying I'm a proponent of it, but there is some rationale behind it.
Is this more Park or more MCAS ultimately? When you look, were you able to look at
Well,
what
I
they?
mean, MCAS is 20 years old, so it is not like the legacy MCAS.
Right.
It's not like
But does
legacy
it have a big
MCAS. It
Park
is like
feel
net-
to it, or
or
is they kinda
Smarter
let a lot of
Balance,
that?
or there were lots of different consortiums out, Smarter Balance and Park being the two larger ones. I would say that it is in alignment with the type of thinking that students should be doing.
But you also have to remember, which is right along the lines of what Mrs. Neer is saying, is that throughout that 19 years or so of experience with the MCAS, they were consistently piloting different question types
Right.
throughout
Right,
all
they
those
do that all
years.
the
So
time.
they,
Yeah.
they would have a pilot question out there that
Right.
wasn't necessarily part of the student's score,
Right.
but it gave them an idea of, okay, maybe we should be going this direction. With that also said, they've consistently been revising standards, but I think they got to a point where they could no longer stay in what they're calling the legacy MCAS
No, I
and really
mean, it does
reflect
have to
what they
change. I'm just
want
curious
students
how
to do
they-
in the new
Yeah.
standards.
All right. And those trick questions would throw them. I don't know about anybody else's kids, but they'd be like, I know that this was.
Oh, yeah, they
And
know,
then you
they
would
tend
find
to
out that
know.
when you'd see it, it'd be like, yeah, that was they
Yeah.
could tell. The kids know.
Yeah,
Especially when
some
the
of the kids do
formatting of it
pick it up.
changed.
Yeah.
It's, what we're asking them to do is different. Well, that's because we have technologies that can do so much of what we used to be testing, right? So
Yeah.
we have to be able to be smarter, work harder and think more thoughtfully
Think
around
smarter,
things
yeah.
because of that. Our students are much more savvy and thoughtful than I was ever. So the next generation results look a little bit more like NAEP. So what you see on the screen right here are NAEP results from 2015. We get these every couple of years. And you can see that the blue, the lighter blue, I don't know if we call that purple or blue or periwinkle, whatever, light blue and dark blue are the proficient and the advanced. And it aligns right with, similarly to the other chart that I showed you. What is interesting is that here are the percentages there. You have 50, 54, 46, and 51. These are fourth grade reading and math and 8th grade reading and math. Those years when we scored that on NAEP, we were number one in the nation for 4th grade reading. We were tied for first for 4th grade math, tied for first for 8th grade reading and 8th grade math. So the scale's different, it's more rigorous, and yet Massachusetts was still, students were still scoring, top of the nation. And this looks similar to our distribution on the new MCAS. That's pretty much it. And then I have this link here. We'll put this up on the webpage because parents may want to go to these links to find out some more FAQs from the state around how to interpret the results that they'll receive and just a little bit more information that's geared towards parents.
Great.
So the takeaway is that our scores are gonna look different.
Yeah.
How we present data is gonna look different because of this, and the word of the year is baseline.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Our elementary parents actually will be somewhat familiar with this type of wording because our elementary report card has this type of wording on it.
Yeah, I
So-
recall that.
So at
last
least
year.
it's not gonna be as drastic a change for our elementary parents as it might be for our middle
Right,
school
but
parents.
how many, are there percentages similar in terms of students that receive exceeding expectations, meeting expectations?
That we do not have. We could potentially get that. It would be difficult, but not impossible. However, I do know that we spent, this is our third, we spent 2 years developing it, right? And this is our third year. The consistent message was that it is, particularly at the beginning and the middle of the year, on some of the standards, it is on the report card. A beginning to meet to progressing is what that's, it is hard to get the meeting. So on our report card, we have meeting the standard. It's different than an assessment. We can't have exceeding on our report card because we're standards-based and we're
Right.
teaching the standard, which asks
Right.
you to do X, Y, and Z. It's kind of hard to measure exceeding that. Does it mean you're gone into the next grade level's standard? So our highest point is meeting the standard, which is really rigorous. So we had language that went out at the beginning with the report cards last year, and again, with both, 2 times it had gone out. And we've had constant conversation with staff around, they correlate how they're grading, and that meeting it's an end, to meet the standard, first of all, is an end of the year expectation. And for some students, progressing or meeting is gonna be more towards the end of the year, because that standard is,
Is it though? I thought it was based on the time of year that.
it depends. So, all right, let me give you so all of,
No, I know, but see, I've gotten
I
these
know.
report cards and we have this
So,
discussion, does
I
that
know,
mean that they're
so-
partially because they're supposed to partially, because they're not supposed to meet until the end of the year?
well, I would go back to
Depends on
reading the
standards.
descriptor and then ask the teacher for specifics, right? So it's gonna be different. I could give you 5 different answers and they'd all be correct, but let me give you one example. Literacy is gonna be the easiest example. The literacy standard, any standard that is written doesn't have a timeline on it. It's a grade level standard. So how we interpret that is by the end of the year, they should be meeting these standards.
Right.
Now, with literacy, that's really easy to do and scaffold up, not scatter, but scaffold towards the end of the year, so your instruction gets more sophisticated and complicated as you progress. So you should see kind of a trajectory in the grading if the student is following a regular progression. Every student's different. With math, if I have a standard on the report card that has to do with fractions or measurement, and I'm teaching that in the second semester, or in elementary we have trimesters, so I'm in the second trimester, there could be an expectation that I am meeting that standard by the end of that semester, because I'm not circling, I might support that standard, but I'm not doing explicit instruction on it like I am in the sequence of the curriculum.
And I know we're getting off topic, but my perception of it, or how I look at it though, is our expectations should be our expectations. So the first trimester should be our first trimester expectations. So did my student meet the first trimester expectations, yes or no? Right?
So
And
maybe
if
we
they're-
have to do a better job at
That's what I'm wondering,
messaging, yeah,
and- 'cause I've gotten the report
That's not
card.
what we measured, and so you probably saw that.
But I know
Yeah.
otherwise, so then I have to, my wife and I have the discussion and say, well, is it partially or is it
And
supposed to be
yeah,
partially,
yeah.
right? Or are they supposed to now be partially because it's only not the end of the year?
And that
So
5th
there's-
grade, when Julia, just really quick, when Julia got hers at 5th grade, we're back in middle school now, it's ABC, I'm old and curmudgeon. Good. But I remember just calling the teacher and going, is she better than a C? She's like, what do you mean? Like, is she a C or a B? Is she a C and a B?
See,
And-
that's why it's
and
tricky, because
that's-
we can't-
And she says,
Can't
she's
correlate
good,
it to
she's
the
like a
percentage.
B,
Can't correlate
and I
it.
said, okay.
Yeah, you can't.
Well,
you
and-
can, but you shouldn't be correlating.
She didn't
But
wanna
in-
do
within
that.
the same-
She really didn't,
No,
but I made her.
I'm sure she didn't.
In analyzing the MCAS to our report card, can we correlate my student is meeting expectations on the report card, but I'm gonna receive a not meeting expectations on the MCAS? Because I would assume, and I don't know this for sure,
We cannot
but
equate that right now. I mean, this is baseline, number one.
I would assume that more, more than 50% of our students, and I don't know this, maybe I'm not, are not partially or not meeting our expectations, right? Or more are meeting expectations.
Are you saying
not?
we have a higher
Remember,
percentage
that's
of
a
50
culminating
in
test
meeting and
that you're
exceeding?
taking as well. The MCAS is a culminating, supposedly, end of the year. It happens in the spring. We're not really thrilled with the timing of it,
Right.
but it is a culminating assessment. Could they be meeting and exceeding the expectations on half of the strand? Maybe there's one strand where they're not meeting or exceeding. Was that strand fully taught before the April test?
Right.
So there's a lot of different variables in it. Should we be aligned with our expectations? Yes. And our DBAs, that's kind of the structure for the DBAs, right? It should, in ELA and math, it should mirror the expectation that the students in those grades that they take it, that the assessment does.
Right.
So that we're able to see how they're doing and make adjustments and provide supports accordingly. In other content areas, that's not the case, but they have rigorous standards, and so the instructions align to those standards. Yeah, we could spend hours talking about it. It's kind of a
throws some of the
philosophical
validity
thing.
out of it. And why do we take the MCAS if it's, I don't know, I know. So anyway.
It is, I can tell you that, I know that our DBAs are aligned with the same expectation in ELA and math as the students experience in MCAS.
But the DVAs, the parents don't necessarily see the results of the DVA, the district-based assessments, and we don't correlate the DVAs to the grading.
Well, they're using they do go into their trackers in
Their
Mastery
trackers,
Connect,
yeah.
as do other formative assessments that the teachers are using.
Okay.
And a lot of teachers, I'm gonna speak to, there's a good number of teachers at the elementary level who are really honed in on using that tracker to because it does kind of align with the same language. Well, it does, not even kinda.
Yep.
It's the same language in the tracker that is in our report cards. So it's a nice correlation. If they're assessing the students in the standards,
Right?
then they have data in Mastery Connect that supports their grading.
Makes sense.
So
Okay.
that is matched,
Right.
for sure. And yes,
Well, because that's homegrown. We
Right.
do the DBAs and we're just basing it off the standards. So the MCAS is a state exam.
right.
Right. But the key is that they have to be, last year they learned about trackers and how they set them up in accordance with the standards so that they can use that to inform their instructional decisions. So if they need to go back and reteach, that's when we're starting to use the.
Well, that's originally
what the
what we
DBA
did, they used the DBAs.
Right.
Right,
Correct.
For.
Right.
Correct.
But you're
Yes.
saying they're aligned,
The rigor level
Yeah.
would be at the
Rigor.
same level as the assessment.
Yep.
Their classroom formative assessments, you get that information back. I now know the standards from my DBA that I might want to circle
Yep.
back for
Right.
the next DBA.
right?
And now my formative assessments, I can just target one or two standards, that's all carte blanche for the teacher. And that was, the design of that was, and the one I'm specifically speaking 3 through 5 right now, the design of those were really built on feedback from the staff. It should align to the MCAS expectations, it came out across every grade level. How many times we give it, so
Yeah.
it's one snapshot though. I would say there's much more value in the teacher's formative day-to-day information that and they
Well, it's
can
good.
house that in
Rightfully
Mastery
so.
Connect.
Right,
Yeah.
it should be.
Yeah,
Right, This should
absolutely.
just be a very
It's
minor.
it's a touch point, and they should.
Right, but this is the bang that we get in the mail, so.
Right.
Yeah,
And the
no,
news
I
What?
know.
In the newspaper,
And in the
Because it's the
yeah.
state, not the,
Our students overall, we are not going to be in shock and awe with how we performed. We continue to perform well, and we'll have more details on November 6th.
Cool.
but
Thank
then
you.
one more question though, is like when we go back and look at MCAS, there's really never a correlation between STAR and BAS on how the students do on those reports or on those tests with MCAS. Or do you
well,
think you'll be
STAR
seeing that more now with this with the new generation MCAS?
Yeah, BAS is, I wouldn't really equate BAS because the purpose is completely different than
Right.
what the MCAS, but the STAR, we have seen that we usually score
Slightly higher in stuff.
we score higher
Yeah.
in STAR on math than we do on MCAS, and we score lower on STAR in ELA, or have in the past, than we do on MCAS. And I would say that we probably shouldn't want to draw, we don't want to draw a
Right.
real, it's just interesting.
Keep them separate.
It kind of gives you the kind of why, but they're not, the STAR assessment is a universal screener to determine whether students are in need of an additional dose, right?
Right.
That tier 2 instruction. That's the main purpose, that's the best purpose for
Right.
STAR. So it's hard to see how that would
Versus
correlate with
state
something
standards.
Right.
that's saying
Assessment.
college and career ready.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's why they look at all those
Yeah.
different exams, the different
right.
evaluations.
Multiple information points.
Cool,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Welcome.
That's always exciting.
More to come.
I know,
Yeah.
we look forward to the next one. All right, so we are moving, anything else on that before we move on? Okay, thank you for that. All right, we're gonna go on to old business. We have 6.1, the fiscal year 2019 capital plan.
Okay, in your packets, you have, not on the big screen, but in your packets, you have a 5-year look at our capital plan. As you know, with years, similar to years past, we have a number of projects that have moved over from fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 19. The pricing has been updated. The one price cost we're looking for is the number 4, the Meadowbrook parking lot redesign.
I was just gonna,
If you remember last year, we had a capital project that actually got funded around lighting.
oh, right.
We held on going forward with that process, some of it because we couldn't get it bid and done this summer, which actually turns out to be a good thing. Because what we're also experiencing at Meadowbrook is that pretty consistently, week to week, we're exhausting all the spaces they have as visitors come to the school, or if we have some type of parent event. And so we really need to look at how do we redesign and possibly utilize, especially on the,
East,
yes, on
yeah,
the
away
east-
from the school?
away from the school
Yeah.
side. You have some, what I would call parking lot islands, grassy areas,
Oh, right.
that we maybe should move out and add spacing. And so that we have fewer situations when we have even a small group coming necessarily to the school where we're parking on the side of the parking lot, or worse, on both sides of the parking lot, so that you're cramping that
narrow.
entrance for either traffic going in or out, or worse, some type of safety vehicle coming in
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
needed. So we met quickly with Mr. Fenney from the Department of Public Works, the administration at Meadowbrook, and we're trying to get a somewhat realistic cost of what a redesign like that would look like. And so I know that we're working with Ty and Bond to get a price. So that price hopefully will have updated next week. Obviously, it will just be an estimate because they won't have done all the design work behind it. With that said, the pricing here from last year has been increased by roughly 4% based on what both Mr. Fenney's seeing in the industry as well as what Sims, Maney, and McKee are seeing in the industry, and actually now, given that I'm talking quite frequently with the Mass School Building Authority, what they're seeing in the industry. So 4% seemed to be the pricing increase.
Just
So, in addition to that, I think the new projects, there's one new project which is added to the list. 36, 36, no, I was accurate with that. High school door security modification. So that's looking at, as we continue to work with the state police on our different safety drills and security drills, they pretty consistently give us recommendations in terms of small incremental changes we can make to make schools more secure. One of those would be at the high school, where if you go to our cafeteria area, you have often 2 doors in almost every entrance that have to lock. They're looking to renovate those and get to a more single door with a panel, so that's more easily locked down and it can become secure should we ever have to go into a shelter in place when we're feeding a third of the school.
Both doors lock onto each other.
They do, but
So
it's
they
not
swing
as,
open.
They're double
it's
doors.
not as, right now,
Double doors,
they're
yeah.
double doors.
Swing, they both
And
swing
so we'll be
yeah.
renovating those, so it's a
Oh,
larger
single.
single door
Yeah.
with a more solid panel.
Yeah.
And so I want to say that there are roughly 6 up there that need to be renovated. And so Mr. Fenny and the high school administration have been looking at that. They sent it out to a vendor for some cost estimates. And actually, the number we had there, $31,200, today was adjusted to $30,918. So coming down a little bit.
That's for 6 doubles or 3 doubles?
It is for, I think it's 6 separate
Openings?
openings, yeah.
Yeah, there's
Which
about,
right now are
yeah,
all double.
Is there?
Yeah,
There's
there's
2 in the
six.
You
big
have to see the
cafeteria,
smaller
2 in the
calf.
smaller?
there's
Oh,
like,
the smaller.
there's 2 in the
Yeah.
smaller,
2 or 3 in the smaller,
Alligator.
because you go to that small room in
Oh,
the
you're
back.
including the gym?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then you
Oh, that
have
side too.
at
Okay.
least
Because the-
2 in the larger calf,
Right.
coming back towards the academic wing.
So you're not counting just outdoors, you're counting the
No,
inside doors?
interior,
too?
Yeah.
Got it.
As the protocol
Yeah,
as you
the
secure a
interior.
building
Block out.
is
Yeah.
you want to create as many barriers, and I don't enjoy talking about this, but it's a reality of our world today. You're looking to create as many barriers, locked barriers, as you can between you and any type of intruder. Right now, in a few of our schools, cafeteria presents a big challenge. So that's one of the newer additions to the capital plan.
Well, these numbers are really staggering when I looked at this report
yeah,
today.
It's not going down.
No,
it's going up.
no, and I haven't heard, was there any thought of bonding in town?
I think it's so early in the process, I
Yeah.
don't think, I mean, it's, we're towards the end of October. I don't think anybody's really heard anything, I mean, who
Yeah.
knows what next year's budget's gonna look like, quite honestly.
Right.
I mean, I hear in my state roles that I have, I hear revenue streams. They're constantly talking about revenue streams on the state level. There's a gap in, this year's budget of about $600,000 already, $600,000 already. So they're talking about revenue streams. How that trickles down to the local, it's impossible to say right now, so. These are staggering numbers.
So we have to start the discussion again, as the one we've had multiple years in a row about the high school and whether or not we'll request
Right.
capital improvements on the high school. I know in the past we've left them on, but had the caveat that
Sure.
we're not really asking for them yet. So are we going to do the same, or what are we thinking?
Well, one of the recommendations here would be similar to renovating or swapping out the electrical panels so that we could continue this year. We did 3 this summer, and that was on last year for, I think, like $31,000 or $33,000. And what that does is really 2 things. One, it upgrades something that has become quite old and almost ineffective. And 2, it allows programming, so actually there's 3 things that it does. 2, it allows programming to continue when you're doing things, something as simple as it sounds anyway, as cleaning up and running the dishwasher and food services without shutting down all the PE in terms of electricity, which was happening on occasion. And then the third thing it does is it shows the MSBA that we're still investing in this and we're keeping the building viable. So it does 3 things in accomplishing that. So
That's not the entire 3 million.
No, that's just the $30,918. You recommend to do. I was using that as an example. So we
was
we
last
got
year.
last year we got
Put
the
Band-Aids on it.
Just
the
to hold
electrical
us over.
panels. This year, you might want to put the door modification because security needs are real and they're now.
Yeah.
So if we can do that, then we know we're creating a safer building for all our students and staff and people that visit.
I mean, I think one of the things that has to be kept in mind is even if we were to get invited in this year, we're still looking at possibly 6 or 7 years
Right.
before we occupy a new building. So to do small, especially security improvements, would be a wise investment.
Right. Now, it's interesting, because Mrs. Blair and I are talking to the MSBA quite a bit now because we're in the accelerated repair. Their timeline is somewhat accurate. It's going to be aggressive. I know I'm
Yeah.
sort of giving you a quick preview of the next agenda item, which is, seems to be my task today. Previews
skip
of slides that
something?
were upcoming, and now I'm giving you an idea. So the hope would be if they're saying, let's say we do get invited in for a core project at the high school, we'll know that probably December.
Yeah.
And so the town won't be done with capital planning at
Right.
that point.
Right, I
And so
know.
we're gonna be able to let the town know that, hey, we did get invited in. And so really, we're just looking at maybe the modification of the doors. Or we didn't get invited in and, you may be looking at modification of the doors and is there something that we wanna do with that section of roof over our sophomore and
Right.
freshman wing? And certainly as we get into those discussions, Mr. Fenny, as he has in years past, would join us and would be
Right.
certainly a very specific and detailed discussion.
I mean, as I mentioned previously, there is an MSBA update at the conference next week, and Jack McCarthy will be there, so we can try and talk to him, see if he can give us any insight. It can't hurt.
No, it can't hurt. He generally likes to keep his cards
I
close to
know,
his vest.
but, you know, he
But,
started, he's gonna remember us. He's gonna know,
Absolutely.
he
He
will know
knows
who we are,
now.
so.
And certainly the accelerator repair folks know who we are, so I call them pretty much every day.
Speed
I have a
up.
lot of questions.
That's okay.
So, separate issue, but we talked about the Meadowbrook parking lot.
Mhm.
It's not on here, but it would be my suggestion at some point to get on here would be the Birchland Park lack of parking
Yeah, that's
spots as
what I
well.
was thinking about.
Only
I
because you
think-
brought it up. I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting we add it now,
Yeah.
I
but
thought
every
about
time
that
you
too.
go
Well,
there.
we can
those
certainly
spots.
add it and put it a few years out.
Years out. I think, I'd like to do that, because anytime you go there for any type of event,
Like
Well, yeah,
it's an issue, and we park
it's crazy.
And then
on the
residents,
driveway,
yeah.
which is dangerous, because
Yeah.
then we're speeding down, trying to get in
Right.
before someone tries to
Right.
come out, and it's
Right.
it's a danger. So only because it's not on here, I bring that up.
Well, it's
Sure.
an issue with athletic events over there too, that we've been
It
involved
is.
in.
That driveway really should be 3 lanes, the third
Yeah.
being parking spots all the way
Right.
up it.
Like
Or
at
create
an
it one
angle.
way.
Or create a one-way going in, but it has been, there have been discussions
Right.
on with other committees
Right.
about parking issues.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, a petition, there was something brought forward to the,
There was a
Council.
citizens group that brought something to the council last year.
Right.
It was a group from Hanward Hill.
yeah,
Regarding parking around Birchland. Most of it was dealing with the parking for the youth soccer games that happen on the weekends, because that brings a lot of people from out of town who are parking, and they may not know that you have a parking lot. If you go down the driveway of Birchland on either side,
Yeah.
you have a parking lot
Right.
that can sufficiently handle probably the crowds that's there. But what they do is they'll see others parking along the side of the entrance to Birchland or on Hanward Hill, and so then they feel, okay, it must be overcrowded, and then they park across from neighbors on Hanward Hill, and that it causes a good deal of
Yeah,
frustration.
so if we could deal with that long term, I'm just.
yeah,
Sure.
but to read, I agree that parking lot should probably looked at it as well,
Sure.
somewhere down the line.
So this is a kind of a first look, second look?
This is a
Second
second
look,
look,
yeah.
yeah, with updating certainly the estimate for the Meadowbrook parking lot redesign. This would be the start that we would send to the town to start the discussion of capital planning.
Did we prioritize last year?
They asked us eventually to prioritize.
They did.
But
At
we
the
did-
very end.
we did not
Everything's
do
really
it
shifted.
Yeah,
at this point, we didn't
Right.
prioritize.
Right.
I'd be curious to see what they come up with for the redesign.
Because could that be
I
work
think
done
we're
by?
offering them thoughts.
Okay.
Mr. Fenny, Officer Kavanaugh, Resource Officer, Mrs. Dakin, Principal, Mrs. Lodi, Assistant Principal, and I all met at the school, and we kind of walked both parking lots, and we were looking at what can we do to add spots, continue to make it safe? What are the different events that Meadowbrook has throughout the year that brings a good deal of people in? What are short-term solutions, such as, in some of these events, we may have to have our staff park on the asphalt that starts their entrance to their playground, which actually Maple Shade's been doing for years.
Right.
And so we may have to, Meadowbrook had not done that before, but we may start doing that. And actually what we did was we did it with the second open house night, and it was a great help.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Staff parked up on the asphalt on the back there, and that opened up slots in that back parking lot, as well as parking in the front.
And would that be work that could be done by the DPW? Was that
Um,
the thought, or that would?
I don't think that was necessarily a
it's too
thought,
big.
I think
I
it
think
was
it's too
to, we wanted to present to, in this case, Ty and Bond, to say, these were our thoughts. What
Oh,
might
okay.
something like that, in your experience, cost?
Okay.
And they may add thoughts to that.
How is the asphalt now existing?
Is
Is that, I guess my question is.
The asphalt on the
needs to be-
playground
No.
is relatively new.
Right.
The asphalt in the parking lot, not
It's,
as new.
no, it's kind of,
I mean, would it be a complete redo?
No, I think at least what we were discussing when we were at the school was it was more around, okay, we have a lot of wasted space.
Yeah.
yeah, there is.
I was
Um,
gonna say
you know,
paving
you
over
have-
areas.
You have a grass island that is used for nothing,
Yeah, just
other
give away.
than to reroute traffic in the parking lot.
Now, wait a
And
minute,
so-
there's a tree that was planted in 5th grade,
We're not gonna hurt
long
the tree.
time ago.
We're not gonna-
Can't kill the tree,
I
man.
did
Kidding,
say,
if you need
no,
it
no,
for
no,
parking.
no.
Say, I
We
was
can
there.
plant a new tree.
Yeah,
I was
I
there.
apologize, this is when I was there as well, thank you.
I was there.
Thank you.
my
Not only were
business
you
tree.
there,
Said to
Still
save
sitting
the
there.
tree, honestly. But we felt that we could get an additional like
had we not
25
been there, trees were gone. But,
25
we-
spots, I think.
We saved the
thought.
trees.
Oh, wow,
It's
Yeah.
okay.
It was
you
about
planted
25
new one.
spots in the back.
cool.
So that's our
Alright.
goal.
And we can carry over the money for the lights an additional year?
Yes, yes, we can.
Because
We
it's already
would
been
not, we
allocated.
would not have been able to get that
Get it
project
anyway.
accomplished this summer anyway.
Okay.
So it was going to be carried over.
Okay.
And so then you'd have to incorporate the lighting into this redesign and have them maybe plot it differently.
Right, because
Yeah.
maybe now, if
Right.
there's
The
a
lights would be
parking
different.
study,
Yeah.
they might come up with a totally
Yeah, the
different
lights would be
scenario on
different.
the best way too. So it was actually, it worked out for the best.
Okay.
So that'll be
Okay.
part of the budget.
Oh,
you know,
because then it would add to the
Apologize.
budget.
Yeah, then
Oh,
it would
that's
change.
cool.
All one
Yeah.
project.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, what's
It's
that?
the all one project that funds
Yes,
allocated
in
Right.
essence,
with
so
our.
that they'll end up being combined, and that'll
Okay.
be talked about during the budget process, because that wasn't the intent a year ago when we were having
Right.
those conversations,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it
It
just
really
did
was
not
just for
come
lighting
to.
safety.
Right,
Yeah,
Right,
why not?
right,
Yeah.
people couldn't see, yeah.
which is still an issue, but we
Right.
can't deal with that until we deal,
yeah.
yeah. So,
We're gonna have a lot of flashlights until we get this off the ground.
You don't need an approval for this tonight, or do you? Are you looking for that?
Yeah, if, what it would help us do, if you approve these projects to at least send on to start our discussions with the town, that would help us, because what the schools now have to do is they have to give individual project descriptions to put this packet together for the town.
Okay.
All right.
If you would include in the motion that the pricing for the parking lot, or the cost estimate for the parking lot redesign will be added.
Gordon, there's
hopefully-
another one that's also there to be determined.
Which one is that?
Terrazzo floor.
Number 18, the terrazzo floor repair.
Yes, but that's not in FY19.
Okay, so it's okay.
We're
that we
sending a
get-
1 year, or we're sending a 5 year?
We send them the 5 year.
Five-year.
Sending a 5 year.
So that they always see what's been adjusted, but what they need the individual project description on, they need the FY19, yeah.
And
No, I was just gonna say, so did you want that Birchland Park parking study also to be added to this, because we would need to know that.
Well, is that too quick?
I don't know if you're gonna be, I don't know if you're gonna be able to
Oh,
get
put
that
that,
done.
I would,
But we
well, can we put
add
it
it.
in, put
Yeah.
a
It is
TBD
number-
on it, if we don't get them a number
Sure.
this year, it doesn't matter, but at least we're starting to talk about it, and it's a placeholder.
Do you wanna put it in like fiscal year 20, so that we
Yeah,
start
I mean,
talking
there's,
about it?
I have no
Fiscal year
envision
21?
that this thing will be funded in the next.
Right,
Oh.
right.
Okay,
We can't, I mean, we have $18 million in requests this year, and we
Right.
funded last year, the last 2 years consecutively, $1 million, so,
For the
Yeah.
town.
And
townwide.
and as I recall, during the budget process, there were questions that came up on why things weren't put on here sooner, like why all of a sudden, so it's better to, I think,
Yeah,
get it
better
on
to
there.
have it
That's
on.
true.
Well, you know,
Right,
if that's the
things came
case,
up. Yeah.
we can make this look a
Well,
lot
yes.
more populated,
Right.
so.
Okay.
And the other thing is, the high school discussion that we just had, some sort of language around, you know, when we
Right,
get the consent
as
application.
part of that memo that we put together is the fact that we are awaiting decision on the core project.
Yep.
Actually, continuing with our theme tonight, to preview, your goals have, the draft anyway has that we'll continue to put into the MSBA for the core project. So, you know, we would say that
Okay.
if we're not accepted, we plan on going forward, if that's the way the committee votes, to putting in again for the core project.
Okay, cool. Then I'll move that we approve and send the summary of the 5-year capital plan to, who are we sending it to, town council?
To this, to go to the town
Town
manager
manager?
first, yeah.
Town manager, including a to-be-determined number for the Meadowbrook parking lot redesign.
Okay, have a motion
I'll second.
and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And that carries forward 4-0.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so we had a little preview, but moving on to 6.2, we have the update on the MSBA Accelerated Repair Program at Meadowbrook.
So this is actually very exciting because it's something that's direct, it's tangible, and it's happening. We got an email, or received an email from the MSBA. Our liaison is a gentleman by the name of Evan Levesque. I think a gentleman who works regularly with Accelerated Repair, a gentleman by the name of Mike McGurl. Although he's not our liaison, he often is in the conference calls that we have with the MSBA and seems very knowledgeable. So we've been working closely with Mr. Levesque and Mr. McGurl over the last 2 weeks. In the first email that they sent us, they had indicated that we had successfully completed the capital and the maintenance information, which we had sent them through their module or portal. And they assigned us, because they have predetermined group of owner project managers and architects and designs that they list actually on their website, so you can go and see. And so they assigned us an owner project manager and a designer. We had a little trouble with the first, not with the company themselves, but we are no longer with the first one they assigned us, an owner project manager, simply because the company was great. It was a company called Compass Consulting, I believe, or manufacturing and consulting, because they could not commit to the time frame. That was my reference to the time frame.
Yeah,
They
too
said, we have a number
Yes.
of,
They're too busy.
and they're a smaller firm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so the first thing the gentleman said to me was, are you looking to get this done this summer? And I said, yeah, that's, according to the MSBA, that's the timeline.
Accelerated Repair Program.
And he said, okay. He said, all right, send me, this was about a week ago. He said, send me the information, statement of interest, and I sent him the Meadowbrook information from the facility study. And the next day, he said, okay, you have a shot of getting this done this summer. However, we cannot help you. So he called the MSBA for us that day. We then scheduled a conference call with the MSBA on Friday. Friday, we had the conference call, and they gave us a new owner project manager, a company called Vertex. And we spoke with Vertex Friday afternoon around 3 or
Late
3:30.
day, yeah.
We set up a conference call with Vertex on today. Actually was in contact with Vertex on Saturday, and we spoke with Vertex and the designer / architect, Castleton Booz Incorporated.
Booze, yes, so they go by
As in
KBA.
BOOS, KBA.
KBA.
That's easier.
So we are moving forward. We have an owner project manager that's now going to start to bullet out, as of our conference call today, the schedule. It's going to be an aggressive schedule, and the designer knows that it's going to be an aggressive schedule. They're looking to get the preliminary schematic design finished by December, so that we can turn information into MSBA by January 3rd.
Because that's their deadline for their February board
Right, for their
meeting,
February
just
board
to-
meeting. And then if we do that, and we're working with Mike McGurl and Evan Levesque, if they don't see anything irregular, the recommendation would be to stay on schedule and let the designer keep working, even though MSBA will formally approve the original design on the 14th of February. Because if you lose those weeks between January 3rd and February 14th, now you truly put in jeopardy whether you accomplish it in the summer of 2018.
Mostly due to the
The lead
turnaround
time
for
for
the,
windows is 12 to 16
making the
weeks.
windows is like
Wow.
12 to
Yeah.
16
Wow.
weeks.
Oh, because they're not standard
That's
anymore, so they're all
correct.
custom made.
Wow.
Yeah.
12 to 16 week turnaround. So they want to bid this out. They want to be ready when MSBA accepts it in February to that final week in February, send out the bid packages and be ready to award a bid in March.
I'd really like to see what they're doing for the windows. I don't like what we did at the high school. We took these big, beautiful windows and they've got this much, and they did it at Maple Shade and it's very dark. And I don't know what they're gonna hand us. I mean, do we have any say in that at all?
Oh, I think we do.
You know.
Right now, what we've shared with them is all the specifications on the current windows. And so what they're really, right now, trying to grasp is, what's the square footage? What do we have to change out? What are we looking at for doors? What's the age of the building? Things of that nature.
All right.
So
Now,
that's
I
what
mean,
we've
you know,
discussed.
if they're putting windows that are gonna fit in the space that was there and
That's what they're
continue
doing.
with that light, that's fine. But
That's
if they're gonna be
right.
reducing the light coming into the rooms
That-
for
I've not heard
safety
anything
reasons
about
or
that.
whatever they got going, I'd like to know about that,
Sure.
okay?
And all we've gotten to so far is giving
It's
them.
very exciting.
Yeah.
It is, it's very.
Here's the most exciting part.
You're
I see
holding us, you're
There's
holding
more.
back, oh my goodness.
Last year, if you remember when MSBA came out to tour the high school, they said
Yes.
our reimbursement rate was 53%. Today, Evan Levesque said your reimbursement rate for this project is 55%.
Wow.
Cool, 2%.
That's great. That's
Nice.
We
right.
went up 2%.
Nice. Every
It's
little
all
bit.
good,
Every little bit helps.
We
So,
have the funding already allocated, it's already.
right now, all we have allocated is the funding for the preliminary schematic design.
Okay,
So we did that in June. So once we start paying that, they will start reimbursing.
the schematic
However-
design.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
because
It's
it's a
all-
process.
it's all
the
been
schematic
approved.
design
When
should-
would the
All we've
funding?
appropriated right now, town appropriated 100,000
Right.
for the schematic design work. So once, you know, this Vertex starts billing us and Castleton Booze starts billing us, we will be paying off using the 100,000 that was appropriated, but they will start reimbursing at the same time.
So actually, we'll only have to spend 45,000.
That would be the
Yeah.
hope.
Correct, that's,
That's
yes.
the, that's the
Yeah.
hope, yeah.
And when do we have to secure funding for the project?
Great question.
Thank you.
I'm assuming that we are going to have to, once that information goes to the MSBA January 3rd, within January, we probably have to appropriate, because now we'll have the real costs.
And we have an estimate for that cost?
Our estimate right now had been a little over 1.5 million for the doors and
Yep.
windows. They said that sounds reasonable. I said, great, it's nice to know that our work prior to this, but now they're gonna do the work to see if that's actual.
So if that's the number, we'd have to allocate the
Go to town.
1.4.
Go back to the town.
In the end,
I was
we'll
gonna
only
say,
have to
you're already in
spend
touch.
Right.
You only have to spend.
6.7
Yeah.
Right, but
or
you do have to
67.
allocate the whole.
You have to
Yeah.
allocate the whole amount.
That's the way it works.
So we should probably send a reminder to Denise and,
Talked to her today.
You just,
Okay.
yeah, it's been good
I wouldn't expect
communication,
any
always
less.
transparent.
Great.
Should we
And
meet
I-
with them before January?
Oh,
Like, if they're
absolutely.
closer
the
Yeah.
council
to-
should be
Definitely.
reminded
Oh,
too,
yeah.
because
Right.
they'll be the ones who have to
Right.
approve it, so.
So in every capital planning discussion that we have, we will be bringing this up.
Okay.
And so that's why I called her today. After I got off the phone with them, I told her.
Right, so how are they gonna fund that? That's a lot of money.
That's,
Well,
What did
Is
Denise
that
say?
Sarah's,
I think that's where, talking with the town manager and the town finance director, we want to come up with a strategy that makes sense for the town, and that's what we recommend to the council.
Yeah,
right.
because the council ultimately has to approve
Right.
whatever the recommendation.
Similar to what we did when we met with them in June, we made a recommendation.
Right,
Mrs. Menard supported that recommendation. Town council then voted to put that
Okay.
forward.
Sarah
Granted.
Bernard or
Right, Sarah
Denise?
Menard,
Okay.
yeah.
So Sarah
Yeah, good
understands the
point.
I know,
process.
sorry, when you say
and
Mr.
take it.
Marner.
Right.
Take it out of
Yeah,
one point four.
yeah.
Sarah knows the 1.4. She's expecting it.
She knows the
Both
one
Sarah
point
and
Whatever.
five.
Denise,
Right, whatever.
yes.
I didn't have a chance to update her, I just updated the town manager today.
Okay.
Now, there was conversation that the designers, what's it?
KBA.
KBA.
Oh, KBA, thank you, are going to, I think, go out to the school next week. They're
Right.
gonna try to get out there next week to start to look
There's a lot of
at the
exciting things
windows,
happening
so
today.
they were very excited on the phone. We had like 4 different, it was a little
Having people from
busy.
Eastern Mass excited to
Yeah.
come out and see us, that was
Right.
exciting.
That's all
I was
good.
really happy about
Should
that.
tweet that out, or tweet it out.
You know, I may
Yeah.
tweet that out. I may.
The visit, yeah.
Okay.
KBA. Come and see us.
KBA.
I may be the only one to look at it though. Who the heck's KBA?
I'll look at it.
No one
I'll
will
look
retweet
at
it.
No, I won't.
I just think this is exciting for us in town because it really shows parents that we are concerned about the conditions of our schools and we are trying our best to
Yep.
work on them.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, and
And
work
we're
through the
using-
process to get some
Right.
reimbursement.
We're
Right.
using
53%
avenues that the
reimbursement.
state is
55.
making available to us
Right.
to be fiscally responsible.
And it'll be a good run-through for a bigger project.
Yes,
Correct.
exactly.
With the
Yeah, that's-
MSBA.
It actually, that piece has been probably the best part, at least for us, because we've never been through a project with the MSBA.
Right.
And so at least this is a project that, one, it's a little bit faster, but it's also a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah.
So we'll have a better idea of what a very large, comprehensive building project looks like.
And tomorrow I am going to Boston. I will be meeting with Eric Busser and I will update him on everything that's going on.
Great.
Cool.
Okay, so thank you for that update, Mr. Smith. And anyone else want to add to anything? All right, so we're moving down to 6.3, the draft of school committee goals.
Okay,
We should save this for Rich. He
okay.
loves it.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
You're being sarcastic.
Yes. Absolutely.
So,
Valerie was hoping I would say that. She's like, yeah.
I'm not
She's
gonna
got
lie.
packing to do.
Yeah.
I don't have a good poker face.
So I think the key word is right there in the agenda, draft.
Yeah.
What I tried to do here was capture the discussion that all of you had during the professional development and goal-setting time that we had scheduled back on, is that October 5th?
Yes, it was.
October 5th. So you have here 1, 2, 3, 4 categories under which, or over which, you have full authority. Fiscal management, budget, capital planning, and the educational program and curriculum and community relations. Within that, you have a number of goals. You have 4 under fiscal management. You have 3 under capital planning. And so one thought as we review this would be, would it make sense to do something that might pull out and cover all of these? And these are very action-oriented goals, almost to the point of being maybe an action step. So in fiscal management, to look at all 4 of those, would a goal that kind of meets all 4 as action steps be something like develop and maintain a school budget that balances fiscal responsibility while addressing student need? There's your overarching goal, and then, okay, so as we look at that, an action step or an area under that goal could be review, how our athletic user fees and transportation fees are impacting families, but also what is the need in those areas? What's the true need to run the athletic program? It also could, that's gonna be a big one, this action one. We do have to review the impact of kindergarten revolving account, because that is
Yeah.
closing.
It's gonna happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's gonna happen. That's just, I'm just offering a recommendation.
Right. Well,
Because I don't know if you're gonna be able to cover, say, 4 or 3 goals and make sure that they happen this year. So as we look at this, there may be some revisions that we need to make.
Well,
Well, it is our first time doing this.
Absolutely,
Right.
no.
And
so
I
thought it
think
was
you
a
do
great-
want to have some detail in there.
You do.
and I don't know that they'd be impossible to achieve. I mean, a simple review of the athletic user fees.
I'm not saying they're
Right.
impossible to achieve. I'm wondering if you know, if you have a goal, a more overarching goal
Yeah.
that captures all four of those, that's why I was just offering that as an example. So is your goal as a school committee, and this is simply a draft
Right.
sentence, you know, that you want to develop and maintain a school budget that balances fiscal responsibility while also addressing student need.
Well, I
Um,
think that's a given, to me, that's
Yeah.
what we're
True, but
supposed to
we've
do
never
with
put
the.
it to paper.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
And then these are action steps
Right.
for this year off
for
of
this
that.
year of what we're doing
Oh,
based on it.
I see what
And
you're
I see
saying.
what you're saying
Yeah.
now.
list or
Right.
It's
Yeah.
a yearly,
Well, this
the
is
goal
a-
remains the same, but the action
Your
steps
key-
are.
Oh, yeah, and the
Yeah,
goal
because
doesn't
our
have to
goal is
remain the
over-
same, but at least you
No.
have an overarching goal, and if you want to tweak it, similar to,
Well-
I'll give you an example.
Yep.
Our goal, number one, in the district SMART goals is relatively the same year to year. We tweak the wording, but the action steps change.
Right.
Right,
Because we think it's important that, actually, we were just talking about it earlier in this meeting, we need to know what the standards are, and if new standards are starting to happen and be revised, we have to be on top of that.
Right.
right.
And so that's part of our goal.
What do you have for the other three?
I didn't get that. I thought it was a we thing. But I did,
Well, she had experience.
I
This is
did
where
take a
going,
stab
you know.
at capital
Oh,
planning.
see, you got something.
And so, under capital planning, I had maintain the viability of all 5 school buildings and support to support 21st century learning for all students.
It's a good one.
I like that one
That's
too.
good.
So that would probably capture the action steps that you need to revise your 5-year capital plan. Certainly, if we're gonna do that, and then we wanna stay with being fiscally responsible in goal 1, we wanna resubmit to the MSBA the statement of interest
Right.
for the
Right.
roof, and we wanna resubmit the statement of interest to the MSBA with the core program. And you could add action steps to that.
Right, or that might change, because if we get
If
a
we get
different
in.
response, right, if we
Yeah,
get in this year,
we
we
get
get a
in.
response, then that,
Right.
we
So
don't have to worry
That
about
action step's
resubmitting,
completed.
right?
Right.
Well, then we come up with,
We come up with a new one.
Let's, so I think our goal collectively is to hit the action steps, right? That's really our goal.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I like the overarching.
I think if we have the overarching
Yeah, right.
and then the action steps, I think it works as well.
Okay.
Okay, well, this is just a draft,
So
so
it
we can
keeps
continue.
ongoing
I'm
conversation.
Certainly welcoming any thoughts on the
Okay.
next 2, because I didn't come up with examples
Time
for
for
those.
that, yeah,
Okay,
That's fine.
Cool.
You're good with this stuff.
So you have work to do, no?
Okay.
You did such a nice job.
You can do that while you're waiting on
Well-
hearing
Okay.
the MSBA.
well,
What I can do is bring that back. I'll put
We can
together
work on
some,
it, yeah.
some overarching
Yeah.
goals.
That's
we
it.
can work on it next week.
That way you can
Yes.
include Mr. Ficero in.
Yeah,
I
looks good though.
think you
looks good.
captured what we said pretty well, because we were just throwing things out
We
there.
were,
that's
well, it was
what
our
it was.
first time
Scattered.
trying
It
to.
was,
You
it
might want to
was,
take things off, but.
we had a lot of years
I
of
don't know.
stuff we were just like,
So,
All pent up.
so I just want to make sure that's on camera, you know, when my evaluation comes around. It was an interesting stream of consciousness
it really was.
during,
Really
during
did.
that goal setting, and so I was taking notes furiously, and so I certainly know what Mrs. Saletti goes through every meeting. To try to bring that back
Thank you, Kathy.
into something that's sensible, so thank you, Mrs. Saletti.
And I just feel as a committee, I think this will be something really important that will continue to build each year.
Right.
Yeah, well, that was the key,
Well,
because,
the intent of the action steps are really helpful for us as a leadership team, because now it gets us thinking, okay, so this is where the committee would like to take the district. All right, how does this align with some of the things that we have in our, district goals and in our building goals?
right,
Okay.
And so we'll be continuing to use this document as it is revised
right.
as part of our guide.
Yeah, because this was our first stab, and, you know, we'll get better at it.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little more homework.
All right, so thank you on that, now I
Thank
can
you.
work with you on that too.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay, and then we have 6.4, the follow-up discussion from public hearing.
Yes, so we've started some of that during
know.
the opportunity to visit. And so thank you to Mr. Harrigan, not only for sort of bringing that discussion to the public hearing the other night, but certainly following up with us this evening. As I had said earlier, I think it opened up some discussions that will be ongoing. And I know that Mrs. Anir not only followed up on some of those discussions, but she worked with the high school administration and the social studies department to start to outline some of the things that maybe will help structure those discussions. And so I'll let you walk us through that.
I'd also like to just share something I wish Mr. Harrigan had stayed, because this might have been helpful for his further understanding of what we are already currently doing. So I want to go over what the 8th grade curriculum is real quick, just to give you some key points of that. I just want to start by saying that it's wonderful that we have a venue for concerns about our programming to come up. And that I just want to emphasize that our staff, I think, does an incredible job. Particularly the Social Studies Department is dedicated and committed to providing the best possible education for the students. So I, just thought I heard a little bit of inclination of some personal complaints there. So I just want to bring that up, that they really do an excellent job and are constantly trying to improve what they're doing. All of our staff does. So American government and local government is addressed in our curriculum. There was a statement about a scattered approach. I just want to clarify that we have a scaffolded approach to our learning. It starts straight in kindergarten, with civics and government being started right away. And where it really culminates, and we'll spend time talking a little bit about, is in 8th grade, and it is continuing to revise and be improved. And that, I just want to share a little bit about that with you. So in 8th grade, it is called Civics and Government. It is a Civics and Government course. There are 4 main components or units of study that take place. And I can get you this document if you'd like to take a look at it at a later time. It starts with a unit on citizen and government. The overarching question is, what is civics? They look at becoming a citizen, the benefits of citizen, voting rights, types of government, the limits of government power, dictatorship versus democracy case study. They move on to, and that is done through September through early October. October through mid-December, they study the roots of American democracy. Where did our government come from? They look at Greek and Roman governments, the Magna Carta, the English Bill of Rights, the Mayflower Compact, Virginia House of Burgesses, the Enlightenment ideas from Locke and Hobbes, the American Revolution, causes for war, Declaration of Independence, and the course of the war, and then they also look at the Treaty of Paris. In their 4th unit of study, they concentrate, which is mid-December through early March, they concentrate on the Constitution and the 3 branches of government. They start with the Articles of Confederation, weaknesses of Shays' Rebellion, Constitutional Convention and Federalists versus Anti-Federalists, principles of the Constitution and the levels of government. They talk about Article 1, legislative branch, what does the Constitution even say? Powers of Congress, how a bill becomes a law, the executive branch. What does the Constitution say? Again, they kind of keep coming back to that. Now it's what does it say with presidential powers, the executive branch, departments and their purposes, the Electoral College. And they finish up with Article 3 with the judicial branch, Marbury versus Madison and the Judicial Review, the structure of the courts, the U.S. courts, the 6th Amendment with Gideon versus Wainwright, and the 5th Amendment with Miranda versus Arizona, and then due process. They finish out the year with, through late March to June, with the Supreme Court cases and the Bill of Rights. I'll just kind of pause there and just say, so this is a very well articulated, thoughtful, American government-focused curriculum that all of our students do get in 8th grade. From there, we moved to the high school, and I think we had a lot of that kind of addressed at the last meeting. But we do provide, the standards of government are covered in multiple courses throughout our curriculum. U.S. History in 1, which is required, covers 88% of the American government and civics standards. And then the majority of those are covered further and above and beyond. Obviously, our Advanced Placement American Government course covers all of them. Contemporary Issues covers about 80% of the standards. Of those particular standards, Modern World History, 67% of them are covered, in addition to the Modern World History standards. And then they also have other things such as the Community Action Learning, which is an elective, and so on and so forth. All that said, so just kind of paraphrasing and giving a little more information around the 8th grade curriculum, which is a government curriculum. along with how we address that further in the high school, and that is scaffolded, not scattered. It's built upon on purpose. We have been in conversations with social studies. So social studies has been going through a revision for a few years, starting 6 through 8, with the purchase of History Alive and the revision of the 8th grade curriculum. So this is something that's been ongoing. At the high school, we have been aware for a little over a year now about the standards that are going to be revised. And so we have been in conversations since then, just kind of talking about what that timeline might look like. So earlier in October, after the American Government and Civics issue came up, we decided to take a look at our plan for how we were going to look at and implement the standards, and what can we do to maybe compromise and meet some of these other things that have been brought to our attention. So this is like a 2 or 3 year plan. So I'm just going to go through a couple of things quickly with you, and I can provide anything in writing you want afterwards. I'm happy to do that. I was trying to keep cognizant of your time and screen time and all that. So phase 1 of our alignment to the standards and kind of how we're going to continue to embed and improve civics and government instruction starts this year. The overarching goal for this phase is to embed and increase engagement with civics learning and with participation overall. This comes in like a 3-part process, so we see 3 main components of this. The first part being that the Social Studies Department has decided to utilize their PLC time to develop civics engagement activities that they would like to incorporate within the 12th grade advisory block. One type of activity could be...
Mention one thing?
Yeah.
So PLC is a professional learning community.
Oh,
So
yeah.
the high school establishes professional learning community time. Basically, it's set up by department. And so the different departments and PLC groups set a goal for the year. So the Social Studies Department's goal will be looking at embedding more civic engagement and opportunities to address the civic and government standards, possibly in a variety of ways.
So one example of one of these activities could be providing more explicit information around voting. And then while we cannot make people sign up, we can offer a voluntary voter registration period during that advisory block. And it fits in within our current structure.
And that actually was mentioned the other night.
Right, and that's
It was kind of a nice way into this planning.
And that idea actually came from the students during one of the clubs that Mr. Polk, the Social Studies Department, is advising. And so he's bringing that forward on behalf of the students. So Part B, beginning in February through March, a curriculum team, which would be the Social Studies Department, myself, the building leadership, are going to take a look at the revised standards that will be released. They go to the board. What happens is they're in process now. They will go to the Board of Ed, and the Board of Ed will vote at the end of January to make them open to the public for public comment. So we'll have which essentially means they'll be released to us in February. So between February and March, we'll be able to review these standards, really take note of what it means for us, and then provide comment back. So we have done this in the past where we provided public comment to ELA and to math, and actually the people who were involved we did that K-12, the people who were involved in doing that process actually felt like our voice was heard because we saw some specific changes that our different committees had recommended. So we would like to make sure we are doing that, just because that is something we would typically do anyway during this process of standards approval.
This is back to the state, Valerie?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
And then Part C of this so this is all happening this year. Part C would be to, the Social Studies Department would like to, after reviewing some of their curricular courses now, in light of the fact that the standards are being revised and updated
Right.
now, what can we do in the meantime, other than just a voluntary advisory type situation, such as in Part A that we mentioned. And what they would like to do is review their current contemporary issues course, which has 80% of the government and civic standards being met in it already, and take a look to see if they can embed more of those standards. And that would be a curricular shift to that course that would not require us, if we were to add a government course, it would require instructional materials in addition to other things. This wouldn't necessarily wouldn't require a complete overhaul, but it could be, they were saying that their goal would be to determine whether in fact they could revise the course in a meaningful way to meet all of the civics and government standards, and then kind of repurpose that course into a civics and issues course.
It's
So
an elective now?
It's an elective now. It's one of the,
It's actually the
we
most
run
popular
5 sections of that elective, so,
Any idea what percentage of students actually take it?
well, 5 sections is a
5
lot.
sections,
Like almost 30 kids
basically
each.
of roughly 25
It's our,
per section.
I closed my computer,
It's
but
more than half.
Yeah.
the majority of the social studies electives are by far the ones that are attended
Right,
the
the most
most, and
popular.
out of the social studies current issues is the most highly attended course at the moment. So that's all of the work that the social studies department and myself and others are going to be involved in this year. Phase 2 is next year. So next year, school year 18-19, the overarching goal for that year would be to provide a high-quality, standards-based educational program in social science and history content, which is what we do on a regular basis anyway, but that's focused on engaging students in the application of skill and content. So social studies is really, it really wants to take what the foundation that students come in with from that 8th grade, very well articulated civics and government course that they 100% of our students take at 8th grade, and further develop that so that they're now applying the skills. And so the first part of that is that they are going to develop the social studies department at the high school is going to develop a formative assessment process that allows them to utilize Mastery Connect to meet their needs more. So they want to develop some common formatives, not the DBAs, these would be in addition to, and track how they are doing with the social studies strands. So the government strand, the geography strand. So they want to find a way to arrange their trackers so instead of it just being by unit, that they are color-coded by the strands, and that they develop some formative assessments that are meaningful for them. The only purpose of those would be first and foremost, or actually period, is for individual and collaborative instructional planning. So it's going to really be more useful for them.
It would give them an idea of how many of our students are actually beginning to master the standards under government, under civics, under geography,
Right,
and so forth.
across the different courses.
Oh, that's the key, is
Yes.
Yeah,
different
Yeah.
teachers.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
right,
Right.
and so that you
Not
would see that
duplicating,
throughout the
covering.
social studies department, you could actually point to it and say, okay, you know, if you look at the department and you look at the trackers of each teacher,
Yeah.
it gives you an idea.
Right.
And the best thing about it was they're coming together to actually do this.
Right.
I was gonna say, we do it for other subjects already,
Yeah.
like
Well,
the
yes,
ELA
but
and
so
math,
they-
because they
they
have the
have
upgraded.
Yeah, and they have
Standards.
trackers now, and they're arranged by their units of study, but
Yeah.
because the units of study vary by course, it's, I think, a really interesting and idea. I thought it was brilliant that Mr. Polk and the committee, the department had come up with, that if they all teach the same strands in different courses. You just heard the rundown of just the government and civic standards that are covered in all those different courses. So if they could arrange their trackers by those strands, they could get a better idea of how well the students are progressing and mastering those standards.
And they might see gaps or duplication.
Right.
Right,
Correct.
and then that would
Yep.
allow them to change instruction
Yeah.
so that we take care of anywhere where we see a deficiency,
Right.
as well as if we're seeing too much redundancy on something, you can now revise your curriculum so
Yeah.
that you're not doing
And
that.
it gives them something that's going to be powerful for them, like right then and there. They're also, which is not on here, they are also in the process of discussing the revision of their DBAs. Right now, their DBAs are more, they use primary sources and write and do a writing piece about, which is very social studies based, but the writing piece is where they're really just, it's aligned to the literacy standards.
Right.
And so while that's important, they want to get back to having their content assessed at that application component. And so that's something that we've been in discussions this year as well, that'll take place. That's gonna be an ongoing process, it'll be a little longer. All of this takes time.
Right, but to that point with the tracking and the strands, if the state were to turn around and make civics a mandatory graduation requirement for high school, would we be okay that we wouldn't have to have a standalone course, but the fact that you're hitting all those standards embedded
Depends
into
on-
various, so
It
you
would
can track like
depend,
how,
right.
if each student has taken all those standards?
Right, so we could, and we would want to continue, we purposefully scaffold our curriculum because it should get more progressive
Right.
as students go through our system, right? So we'd want to take a look at, there's a few other factors with the state having new standards. One of them is that eventually a social studies assessment is on the docket, and who knows what that looks like or what grade it would be given in.
Right.
So yes, we could absolutely still hit that within our current course structure, but we would want to see at what point, given the fact that there would eventually be an assessment, if there was,
Right.
we'd want to make sure, and the content, it wouldn't just be on one area either. The
Right.
content of the social studies assessment would cover more than just
Right.
government. So we'd want to make sure we were balancing the content prior to that assessment.
And that actually may be a very pivotal point for the state to figure out, because if you look at the standards that were completed in 2003, which are the current standards, their entire emphasis is making sure that all students in the Commonwealth are thoroughly instructed in U.S. History 1 and U.S. History 2, because that's what the assessment was going to be on. So if they change that, my guess is that that's how they're going to gear their next set of standards.
But we'll have a good idea just by reviewing and unpacking the standards together from January. So February and March, we'll give public comment. They will send back out the draft after that, like here's what it looks like with the public comment, and they usually do track changes so we could see original and what what the state gave for input. And then the board votes in June, the Board of Ed, whether to adopt those standards or not. And so that's why, and then we would know where we stand. We won't know where we stand with an assessment for a while.
Right.
And that's not the point. But we typically, we meet the standards and then go above and beyond. For us, whenever we look at the standards together in curricular teams across the district, we always mention that is the bottom level. They're rigorous and they're great, and we don't want them to dictate how we teach. That's not the purpose. So the last thing that is on our 2 to 3 year plan here is that the curriculum team mentioned earlier would begin next year for planning for the integration and revision of the courses and/or instructional practices based on what those final standards looked like. So we can do some initial planning and we'll understand where our gaps are currently when we see the draft. But as far as what our implementation plans need to look like, we can't do that until we see the final product. And then, throughout this process, I would be able to provide you with some updates and some progress notes on where are we with kind of meeting those standards. And again, it won't just be 9 through 12 that we're looking to meet those standards, it's gonna be K to 12.
Everybody, yeah.
So and it usually takes us a few years.
Oh, yeah.
And you want it to, you don't want it to just be kind of, oh yeah, we do this, we do this, we do this. We wanna take a look thoughtfully around setting our priorities as a district.
Well, I
Work in
really do
progress.
appreciate all the work
Yes.
that had been done. Monday was
Absolutely.
really outstanding.
Yeah, the students and staff did an amazing job.
And just what you brought us tonight and the fact that they're already working on it is exciting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is what we do. This is why I
Well,
love what
I
I do.
think-
This is it.
I
to work
think
with
it's
others.
good that we know now what is being taught.
Yep.
We didn't really,
Right.
at least personally, I didn't have an understanding.
Right.
Yeah, I knew it was there, but now I've got a greater understanding how in-depth we actually go.
Right.
And that's
And
important.
they're always working like that.
Yeah.
Always.
They're
Oh yeah,
always-
this is how
it's
we do.
always
A lot of this,
happening.
this is what we do with every department.
Yeah.
It goes through ebbs and flows, right?
Right.
Science is kind of an ongoing up and
Yeah.
down thing. Yeah, I'm currently working with the middle school science department to support them in their curricular revisions. Yeah, so now the focus is science and
Right.
social studies right now.
But having spoken with Mr. Harrigan, and I know this was one of his concerns, is to really get the students to understand our local town government.
Mhm.
Who our elected officials are, what the charter is, what it looks like, So is there any mention of that in your discussion with the social studies department or working with them?
I do know that they have had, gosh, I didn't bring that note with me, and that was on paper, which is ironic for me because it's usually on the computer. But they have had people come in. I mean, we have local government and business people who are here every year for the senior project. They sit on our boards, our
Right.
panels for that. They're very engaged in that respect. I can ask Mr. Polk, specifics. I know that they always bring it back to it's just the nature of their teaching. If they're talking about certain components in government, they always reference it back to something the students are going to understand, and local government would be part of that.
Yeah.
So,
I remember,
I'm
I
sorry.
remember my kids when we were going through the whole changeover and the selectmen and all that kind of stuff. I know that especially in the social studies classes that they were in, it was just great conversation and bringing out all that stuff with the kids, and it was local and it was discussed, and it was something that was done for a couple of years.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, what the kids got out of it, and how much they made, but they learned what was happening and why we were changing and the
Yeah.
reasons behind it. And it wasn't part of the curriculum per se. But I do
Well,
know
it's
that.
current issues, right? So they
Yeah.
bring in current issues.
Yeah.
I would bet money if I was a betting person, that you will not find a social studies teacher in this district, never mind the high school, who does not infiltrate and elaborate their curriculum with current events. That is the whole purpose of our history study, right? Understand what has happened before, the structures that have been developed, and how they impact today, and how they'll continue to shape tomorrow. That's it for social studies. That is one of the main
Well,
focus.
That's history, and what happened a couple of years ago, they could easily embed in any discussion that they had,
Right.
what was
And
going
they
on
still
here
do,
in the town.
it's just
And,
who they are. Yeah, God love them.
So I have a question. As they go through this first phase this year and they're discussing in their PLC activities to be implemented in the 12th grade advisory block, and also looking at revising contemporary issues, I wonder if that's where we can also look, because my guess is of the 80%, the 20% that's not covered, it's going to be local government that is part of that 20%. And I wonder if that's where some of your look at local government and your speakers, so you take maybe, obviously, contemporary issues that might be global, and you start to break them down and see impact on a local level, something of that nature.
I'll make sure to find out where. I'm pretty sure we're doing that through our bringing in the current events, and just how you teach the structure. You relate it back to something that's a little more, more local.
Yeah.
So, but we'll make sure that in our next meeting that we have a conversation around how, we learn more about how we are addressing local government.
Right.
And maybe I can
Right.
bring something back to you
Yeah.
regarding that.
Sure.
Because I think that's the key question. One of the keys of how are we addressing local government and local issues.
Yeah, yes.
And the way,
Well, I think it's a question to us because we're not as well versed in the curriculum, even myself, as we
Right,
could be,
yeah.
right? So,
Yeah,
yeah, I guess I come back to the question that I just don't know how to respond to is we could be doing better. I'm not quite sure how that's measured or what metric is being used to determine that we could. Now, personally, I mean, if we can all do better all the time in everything, there's always room for improvement, but
that's open to anybody's interpretation.
right, so
that's-
internally,
right.
we're hitting the standards.
Right,
Which are a rigorous bar, and we go above those. And we're engaging students in ways that they should be grappling with and developing their own thoughts and ideas around this. So I really am, I can't say enough, all of our teachers, but our social studies department is, and that goes with our elementary too. They take pride in what they're doing with the social studies curriculum, and we've seen amazing things happening at the middle school level. The 8th grade curriculum, I couldn't be more happy with the revisions they've made over the last few years, and this year they continue to work on it and build it. And it really does provide a good foundation for those students to now go into these different courses, these different avenues in the social studies department at the high school. And, you know, one thing that hit me at the hearing was, I think whatever decision is made, just the students' voice and choice really came out that was something that we need to kind of honor and protect.
Which is the other part of what, right.
While meeting rigorous
And that's,
standards.
and that was the other part of the petition, and again, I'm not saying which side I'm on yet, but the whole idea of it also being a requirement for graduation. I think that was also the larger part of Mr. Harrigan in his petition also was not just the, not just the American government class, but also having it as a graduation requirement. So, and the students, I think, were very vocal in how they felt about that. And, sometimes I feel like we have to listen to the students because then I just feel like we're those, bossy adults that are making decisions for them, but we're not the ones that have to take the consequences.
12th graders, no less, who are preparing to leave this school and tackle their next,
Right.
either their career,
Yeah.
they're doing some training, college, I mean,
Their message was clear.
they've already made some huge
Right.
individual choices, with the whole college and career, whether you're going to college or trade school, going into the military, those are large decisions
Yeah.
that our students have made by that point. And a little more freedom in what they're learning that year, I think is really important, particularly for to transition into their next
I
phase.
completely respect what he did and what he wants to do, and I think I'm happy we have the dialogue. But I also know that, the colleges, if your high school has AP courses, they expect you to take AP courses. If you're, and some of the SATs, you have to take subject tests. And you need to get the education to take these subject tests. You might want to have a path of mathematics or science. You may have to have a math and a science subject test that you've taken in order for you to even be in the running for some of these schools. And that's where, I have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with it, but I understand why these kids are concerned. Because there's all these little things they're throwing at our students that we don't even, you haven't even hit
You
yet
haven't hit high school yet,
until
right?
you hit
You
the
don't-
high school. And
yeah.
quite frankly, we didn't even know going into junior year that, oh my God, you need to take this test and forget about the MCAS. These are things that
Oh,
are
yeah.
taking you to college, and so it is too bad. And I mean, I know I was Model Congress, ELHS, got Best Bill Award. One of the students in our school actually got a 4-year scholarship if he chose to AIC because he was the best student in Model Congress, and I know how important that is. But at the same time, our students have so many interests, and we have to be respectful, as important as our American government is, that we have to be respectful of their interests.
Colleges are becoming more competitive now.
They are.
And to your point, you get into junior year and your kids come home with all of this other stuff. Like, I gotta do it. Okay, fine, we're gonna figure it all out. But we have to do our best, not to minimize anything, but we need to do the best job we possibly can to get these students ready to take the next step, whatever it may be.
And I
And
hope
we're doing it, we're
if
doing
the
it.
state comes back with requirements, that they add it into the 2 years of US history that our students have
Right.
to have.
Right.
I mean, to add another component onto that is gonna, and they've added that you have to have 4 years of math already.
Right.
And you have to have so much, and if they keep just adding, at some point there'll be.
It's such a given, the schedule's already gonna be given to them for all 4
Right,
years.
right.
So that's the thing, with there being, like, with
Longer
that.
days.
Longer days, full year.
Don't go there, don't go there.
So would there be an opportunity, like would the state have us revise that graduation requirement where it's
So-
like US history / American
Well,
government?
Well, who knows, anything could happen, but if their standards review and revision follows the path of the last 3, they tend to provide you a lot of what their guiding principles are, the overarching goals, and then they give you and they make suggestions, but they don't necessarily, they have not said one science pathway over another. We made that decision ourselves. They did not say teach A, B, and C through literature at the secondary level, and but they had like some texts. They weren't even required; they were suggested text. So they tend to give you the big piece, and they have been giving more local control to how you meet that. And I would assume that with US government, it would be absolutely the same. And not US government, but the social sciences and history standards.
The most concrete they became in the last 6 years is when they required that fourth year of math. If you remember, we had the guidance department in here quite a few years ago because the state actually required that you take math
All 4 years.
all 4 years. And that was then a requirement to get into the state
Right.
college system.
Right.
Right, which again was driven from the
Right.
colleges, and a lot of our students were taking a fourth anyway.
Right,
in
well, it's
certain
also
tracks.
like
I know, they
our
have to-
foreign language.
Yeah.
Right.
They're only required 2 years, but
A lot
they're
of ours
told
take
the colleges want to see 3 years, so
Yep.
now they're taking 3 years.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess what would be helpful for us to help you is what would you like us to outline, draft, or bring, say, to the next meeting
Yeah.
to help you with this process? Would you like us to outline the phases that we just discussed, as well as maybe different answers that we get based on the discussion we've just had from the social studies department?
Yeah,
I like the
then-
phases.
yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
I could get that
I
too.
So
think
there
you've
would
shown
be-
you've done your due diligence on this, you've worked with them, you did it
Absolutely.
before the topic came up in years past and
Right.
following
We
through
would do
it
it,
now.
yeah.
And I want to say on that, we didn't even touch on the 40 hours of community service that our
No.
students are required to do.
No,
And I know that's not what he's looking for. He really wants to, really see an American government's class with a graduation requirement. I just
Yeah.
don't know if we can give that answer 100%, if there's gonna have to be a little self-reflection on his part and maybe
Well,
see
wish
that,
he
like,
had-
come up with a, I don't wanna say compromise, but a resolution.
I wish
Well,
he
you're-
had been here to hear
Right.
what the eighth
Yeah.
grade curriculum actually looks
Right.
like.
well, I think it's an ongoing conversation because of the timeline that Valerie has laid out
Right.
from the state.
Right.
That
Right.
we'd be crazy to make any drastic changes
Right,
now.
right.
Yeah,
But I
and it
think
would be a
given
waste
what's-
of
Given
effort,
what's
time, and
possibly
money.
coming,
quite
God,
frankly.
yeah.
I
We haven't
think
even
you-
talked about the financial impact.
I think you
Right.
have an avenue through contemporary issues to probably get at, if we were already covering 80% of the current government and civic standards, and they're looking to revise that this year, there's one of the better opportunities to cover everything.
Right, but that would be
And,
for next school year, not.
Right, it's not gonna happen
Right,
this
no
school year, but
change,
I
right.
think
It takes a while to.
Yeah.
you know, I think Mr. Harrigan and the petitioners would
Almost
understand that. Obviously, he's got over 40 years' experience of
Right.
being in school, so he understands that that's going to take some time. But that would be, so then you might change the title of that course to be more reflective of all the content that it's covering.
Right.
And so that would be a work in process, or in progress, rather. Phase, or Part A of Phase 1
Just
will
'cause we're
be
trying to cram
looking
it all
at,
Yeah, oh, yeah, I know.
looking at, and I thought this was brilliant, and it was really, and I think you've already said this, beneficial that this came from students. How do you use the Spartan Block and the advisory as a social studies department to get at some of these things that maybe you're not getting at as consistently in just your regular coursework?
And that hits everybody.
And that hits everybody.
Yep.
And so those two pieces are really beneficial and could bring some significant progress toward, moving this whole thing forward.
Right.
Can we see how many students, percentage-wise, do take the contemporary issues upon
Sure.
graduation?
Yeah?
Then there's also the kids who take AP
Take
government.
contemporary issues?
I took
Who might
contemporary
not
issues
take
last year,
that.
and I'm taking AP Gov this year. So
There you go.
I took all of them.
So how many
You
kids
get
are
it.
in AP, are in AP Gov?
We have 34
Um,
students enrolled currently.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's
so
two
those are
classes.
kids that probably wouldn't take the other.
Well, they
Well,
could have
she-
taken it
Valley
prior
You were able
to.
to take both?
They might,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So there may be a way at getting the majority of our population through this and give them options so that, if they're not taking AP government, they're covering the government and civic standards in another elective
Right.
that seems to be quite popular.
Which was what you were
We
talking about,
could-
you could track it better and
We
then
could.
you'll know.
Right.
We currently have 87 students enrolled in contemporary issues this year.
Is that semester?
Yeah.
So do we have second semester, would we have
They may have
equal
like a,
amount?
they might have that already mapped out.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we would have another
Remember
87
I
in the
asked this
second
question,
semester.
I just can't remember what the response
Oh,
was.
so they would have that contemporary issues both in first and second semester?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
I
it's
think
not
that
just
might be
offered like a
87
fall, I
for
don't
the
know how
year.
you break it,
That
what
might be
languages.
87 for the year.
So,
Okay.
so we have to formally respond, correct?
I think we have to have some.
Well, there's a timeline in the charter,
Right,
and if
It's 90 days, wasn't it?
it's,
Is it
well,
90?
I think it's somewhere around
60?
November 24th.
Yeah, basically,
In that
you're
timeframe.
3 months from when the petition was received.
Right.
So that would take you to about November
So we
24th.
do have to formally
quickly.
respond.
Yeah.
with
So you
whatever-
would want to, we'll bring the outline of what's going, or what has started since
Mm-hmm.
the public hearing, and then you can direct us as to what else you may want to add, and we can send that off as
Because I
as a
think in our
response.
next meeting, we're gonna probably have to decide how we're gonna respond.
Right.
That's-
I think part of this, and then the other
It's gonna be a
piece
lot.
would be
Yeah.
This one.
keeping the dialogue open.
Right, well,
Right.
that's gonna
So
be
I
part of
think
it, but
that's
I mean,
important.
I think it's like twofold. Here's what we're doing and here's how we're gonna keep the dialogue
Right,
moving forward.
right.
So,
okay.
okay,
Well, I appreciate all the work that you did for that tonight, so thank you.
yes, thank you.
Yes, the department certainly.
I'll pass it on to them too.
Well, it's a lot of work, believe me.
All right, so
Happy
let's
to do it.
keep moving down this agenda.
I move that we approve the Mountain View fourth grade field trip to the Connecticut Science Museum,
Wow.
November 30th, 2017.
I'll second that.
All right,
Continue
motion made
again.
and seconded.
Same every year.
It
It's the
is,
same every year.
It's the same every
No
year.
surprise.
All right, any further discussion?
No.
All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. That carries forward 4-0. All right, now I'm sad that Rich isn't here for this next one.
Oh,
So
God.
No,
move
this
to
is very exciting.
Okay, this MIA request for the East Long Meadow High School to host soccer/field hockey playoff games.
So we are being looked at quite a bit by the
Yeah, I was gonna say, haven't we
MIA.
done this
It's
before?
good.
Last
stuff.
year we did soccer. This year they're asking us for soccer and field hockey. As you can see from the memo from Mr. McGee, our athletic director, the playoff games would happen somewhere between November 6th and November 11th. And most likely we'd be dealing with Division III and Division IV soccer playoffs and field hockey playoffs.
Cool, that's great.
And that doesn't interfere with anything we have going on.
At that point, we are either in the playoffs or we are packing up and looking at winter sports.
I'll move that we approve the MIA request for ELHS to host soccer and/or field hockey playoff games.
The request also is that we waive our rental fee.
Yeah, you didn't let him finish.
We've
You
always
didn't
done
let
that.
him finish.
Similar to
always
last
done
year,
that.
similar to last
Yeah, it was the same, because
And waive the
they're part
rental
of.
fees.
year. Okay.
Okay, I'll second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And that carries forward 4-0. Perfect. And as always,
you.
we'd like to, yes, you're welcome. As always, we'd like to thank Don Mackey for being here tonight and staying the whole time.
Yeah.
Also to our student rep, Ally, thank you very much. And with that, our motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, and a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, thank you everyone for staying tonight. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, hearing none, that carries forward 4-0. The meeting is now over. Thank you very much.
Good job.